Chapter 3:18. The terrain of the island had not changed, but all the rocks had been swept away by the hurricane into the seawater surrounding the island, making the entire island look bigger. What Xiao Lu saw next was something she would never forget for the rest of her life. The hurricane disappeared along with the green light on Qi Yu's body. Then, a layer of green light appeared on Qi Yu's body. Although she was tens of meters away from Qi Yu, Xiao Lu could clearly feel an unprecedented natural aura rushing towards her. Even the natural aura of the ancient beasts could not be compared to that of Qi Yu. Qi Yu waved his hands, scattering seeds from his hands and landing on the island that had been cleared. Under his precise control, the seeds of the various plants were divided into different areas and landed on the island. The sparse plants on the island were mainly due to the seawater surrounding it. The salinity of the seawater greatly restrained the growth of plants. However, this was not a big problem for Qi Yu. The green light wrapped the seeds and landed on the ground of the island, drilling directly into the soil. The green light disappeared and the light around Qi Yu's body turned blue again. Blue light spots could be clearly seen gushing out from the sea around the island. They condensed above the island. The rain appeared. The man-made rain, the rain without a trace of salt, gently caressed the entire island and nourished every plant on the island. The green light appeared again. This time it was like a huge light shield. It enveloped the entire island. The air on the island seemed to have been sucked out, but soon, when the strange plants broke out of the soil, the air reappeared. Under the cover of the green light shield, the air was completely different this time. Xiao Lu was dumbfounded as she watched the various plants that had only appeared during the era of the ancient beasts start to grow wildly on the island. Even though she was hundreds of meters away, she could clearly see the astonishing growth rate of each plant. The previously barren island had now turned into a green ocean. Apart from the clean beach around the island which still looked the same, the entire island seemed to have been revived, exuding an abundance of vitality. What was going on? No, impossible, absolutely impossible. Xiao Lu cried out involuntarily. Everything in front of her had long surpassed the scope of her understanding. She did not know when Qi Yu had returned to her side. He smiled and said, "Didn't I say that in this world, nothing is impossible? In other words, in this place, above the disciples of Kirin Group, I am the God here. I can pierce through everything. Similarly, I can also change everything here. Now you should believe that I didn't lie to you before. Our Kirin Group's goddess of nature. I wonder if I can have the honor to invite you to visit our group's Qilin Island? You will be the first guest here after it was built." Xiao Lu didn't know what to say. It wasn't until the moment her feet touched the ground and she felt the aura of the ancient beasts that she knew it was all real. Looking at Qi Yu beside her, Xiao Lu suddenly stretched out her hand and pinched his arm. Then, she asked in a daze, "Does it hurt?" Qi Yu said with a bitter face, "Why don't you pinch yourself? Pinch yourself and you will know whether it hurts or not." That's right, this place was like the era of the ancient beast. The aura was exactly the same. In fact, it was much richer than the natural aura of the ancient beast. The bright fruits had already grown quietly, shining with a crystal light. The pale green light in the sky had gradually disappeared. However, Xiao Lu felt that it was only its color that had disappeared. It was not itself. Watching Xiao Lu walk into the forest in front of him, Qi Yu's eyes revealed a trace of gratification. Success. He had succeeded. On Earth, he had built a place that belonged to him. If it was before he went to the realm of gods, although he could also create such a place, Qi Yu knew that what he could do was only create it. He could not maintain it. After all, it was not difficult to maintain the growth of plants. However, it was almost impossible to maintain the environment here. The light shield formed by the energy of the source of nature must always exist for this small island to maintain its current appearance. Without Qi Yu, the energy of the source of nature would definitely gradually dissipate. In other words, Qi Yu had to inject natural energy into this place every once in a while to maintain the status quo. That would be a very difficult task. However, it was different now. Everything had changed. There was only one reason, and that was that Chi-Yu had understood the true meaning of the soul. Using the same method, he only injected a trace of the aura of the soul into the source of nature that he output, and it became an individual. From now on, as long as he did not die, the source of nature would always exist here. It would absorb the energy molecules in the air to replenish itself and maintain the invisible protection of the small island. It was an energy that no one could see, and only Chi-Yu could feel its existence. It could be said that the appearance of this place was a miracle in the world, and this miracle was created by Chi-Yu. Just like what he said, he was already a god, a real god. Looking at Xiao Lu's cheerful look, Chi-Yu could not help but smile. With his ability, how could he not know how Xiao Lu felt about him? When a girl liked a man, the atmosphere when they were together would definitely be different. However, he did not want any problems in his relationship, so he had always pretended to be deaf and dumb. This time, he brought Xiao Lu here and built the island to look like the ancient giant beasts for her. This could be considered a kind of compensation from Chi-Yu to Xiao Lu. Chi-Yu stood in the same place and watched Xiao Lu immerse herself in the environment of the ancient giant beasts. In this unique domain that he created, he fully absorbed the aura of nature to replenish the energy that he had consumed just now. As the Zodiac army cultivated in the 5 elements domain of the Kongtong seal. Therefore, Chi-Yu had to continuously input the source of nature energy into it every day. Although this was not a small burden for him, it was not enough to affect his ability. After all, the speed at which he recovered the source of nature energy was extremely astonishing. Although it was not enough to completely make up for the consumption, as long as he consumed too much energy, he would calm down and cultivate for a while, and the energy in his body would automatically be replenished. Chi-Yu, thank you. Xiao Lu finally woke up from the intoxication of the wonderful environment and returned to Chi-Yu's side. Perhaps it was because of the excitement just now, her little face looked red, and it was especially lovable. It's good that you like it. From now on, this is also your home. As long as you are willing to come, this Kirin Island will always be open to you. Chi-Yu looked at Xiao Lu with a smile. From her eyes, he saw that strange and familiar look. Xiao Lu's eyes looked a little blurred, and she stared at Chi-Yu. Can you tell me, who are you? I asked everyone. I also asked my uncle, but they refused to tell me. Why do you have such great power at such a young age, and why every one of them is willing to follow by your side? They are all at your disposal. Why do you not look outstanding, but have such a pair of peerless confidants? Tell me, why is all of this? Chi-Yu sighed and said, Why? Maybe it is because of power, or maybe it is because of some other reasons. How do you want me to answer you? Miss Xiao Lu, don't think too much. We will always be friends. Isn't that right? Between friends, you shouldn't ask too much. You see, I have never asked about your personal affairs. Xiao Lu looked at him, a little stunned. Chi-Yu, you really don't want to tell me? Or should I say, are you running away from me? Chi-Yu shook his head and said with a smile, No, I'm not running away. I can only say that a person's heart can carry, after all, is limited. And my heart is now full, I still have many things to do. After everything is done, I only hope to bring this full heart with me, and live a peaceful life with my family and friends. I can also give you a simple answer to your question. The answer is very simple. Imagine the name of my group. Perhaps you will understand. As soon as his voice fell, Xiao Lu found that the natural aura around her had completely disappeared, and the feeling of her feet on the ground had also disappeared. Surrounded by white clouds, her body flew up again. In the blink of an eye, she had already disappeared. You are not a human? Xiao Lu suddenly exclaimed. She was so impatient that it sounded like she was cursing someone. Chi-Yu touched his nose and said with a bitter smile, No, I am a human. It's just that Kirin's blood flows in my body. Have you seen those American blockbusters? You can think of me as an existence like Superman, except that I don't wear my underwear on the outside. Don't think too much, that won't do you any good, right? After returning to the Dragonfield courtyard, Chi Yu gently placed Xiao Lu next to her car, and looked at the girl deeply. His body had already soared into the air. Xiao Lu only felt her vision blur, and what was left in front of her was only air. A feeling of loss arose spontaneously, and Xiao Lu only felt that her heart was empty. However, she quickly remembered the small island just now. Everything on that island had long been deeply imprinted in her mind. Although she did not know if she could forget that man, she was sure that the small island would be her home, forever. The comprehensive improvement of the wind thundercloud force gave Chi Yu an extremely special speed. The soul of the wind, in a form close to teleportation, could send him to the place he wanted to go. Vatican, the headquarters of the Vatican. It was also the Holy Land in the eyes of the believers of Kami. There was almost no one here who did not believe in Kami, and almost all the tourists who came every day were here to worship. It was Chi Yu's first time coming to this mysterious place, so he naturally did not know the way here, and it was impossible for him to find the place he wanted to find. However, he had his ways. As the king of the Zodiac, if he wanted to find a person, and he also knew the approximate location of that person, it was too easy. Floating in the air, the effect of Kiran's concealment made Chi Yu's body completely invisible. He quietly released his mental strength, and almost in the blink of an eye, it enveloped the entire Vatican. When his mental strength was released, Chi Yu immediately discovered that a very strong aura had filled the entire Vatican, and his huge mental strength was actually being violently attacked by this kind of energy. This was the first time Chi Yu had encountered such a situation, and the strong light made his breathing become a little hurried. What a strong energy! No, this definitely did not belong to the Pope, nor did it belong to the four cardinals. Even if they joined forces, they would definitely not be able to release such a strong energy. Could it be that this energy came from the heavenly realm? No, that's not right either. Chi Yu quickly denied this thought. Because, although this energy was huge and very tyrannical, Chi Yu discovered the secret behind it. This powerful energy did not have a soul, which meant that it existed on its own without a controller. His sharp eyes pierced through the sky, observing everything in Vatican. Chi Yu suddenly understood that this huge energy was the power of faith. The Vatican had tens of millions of believers all over the world. The faith of these believers caused their souls to condense into a large amount of energy, forming a huge barrier for the Vatican. No wonder it was so difficult for him to break through it with his mental power. Which friend has come to Vatican? Please show yourself. A faint voice rang in the air, and a golden figure quietly appeared less than 20 meters away from Chi Yu. Chi Yu was shocked. This person could directly approach him, and even discover his whereabouts? Since when did the Vatican have such a powerful expert? Taking a closer look, Chi Yu could see that the other party was a Westerner in his 50s or 60s. His golden hair had already turned white in many places, and his golden robes gave Chi Yu a very familiar feeling. Although he was flying in midair, his figure was tall and straight, and a chilling aura constantly emitted from his body. Tribunal, Chi Yu remembered. The attire of the person in front of him was clearly from the Vatican. Looking at the color of his clothes, he should at least be at the level of the deputy head judge. He retracted his scattered mental strength and enveloped the person in front of him, only to see the expression of the person from the tribunal suddenly change. His body had already become shocked, and he was completely bound by an energy that he could not resist. Chi Yu's body slowly appeared in midair, and the shock in his heart had already disappeared. Although the person in front of him was not weak, and could even be compared to the four cardinals, he was still far from him. The reason why the other party could discover his whereabouts was probably directly related to the huge power of faith. "Hello, friend from the tribunal." Chi Yu faintly looked at the old man in front of him. "It's you." There was a trace of surprise in the eyes of the person from the tribunal, and the expression on his face also became respectful. "Hello, King from the East. May I know why you are here peeping at Vatican City?" "Chi, you know me? I don't think I know you before." "Yes, you don't know me, but I know you. Back in outer space, you single-handedly destroyed an asteroid with your sword. I will never forget it. Your contribution to Earth is unparalleled by any other hero in the history of mankind. Everyone who participated in the operation of the Vatican will remember your face forever. My name is Liszt, the director of the Vatican Tribunal. Welcome to the Vatican City." So this person also participated in the operation to destroy the asteroid. No wonder he knew me. With a faint smile on his face, Chi said, "Director Liszt, you're welcome. I am here to see the Pope. I don't know if you can introduce me to him. I was just looking for the Pope's aura." Liszt shook his head and said, "No, actually I didn't find you. It was God who told us that there was a distinguished guest, so I came out to look for you. Since you are here to see His Highness the Pope, then please come with me." Chi naturally knew that Liszt couldn't possibly tell him the secrets of the church, so he didn't ask any more questions. Under Liszt's lead, they entered the Vatican. Vatican City, for the various countries on Earth, was definitely a mysterious place. It was the headquarters of the Vatican, and it could be said that it was a place where the theocracy was very concentrated. Under Liszt's lead, Chi came to a palace. When he entered this group of palaces, the huge power of faith that his mental power had sensed earlier had disappeared. "Welcome, Mr. Chi. The Vatican is honored by your presence." Pope Marty held his scepter in one hand and strode out of the palace. He welcomed Chi. Marty looked quite different from before. His expression was not as deep as before, but his aura of light was much stronger than before. Especially the peaceful and happy look on his face, it made Chi feel less bad about him. Compared to Yamu, Marty was easier for Chi to accept. After all, he was just an accomplice and did not do anything directly. Of course, Chi would not forget how Klinsmann died. It was the 4 red-robed archbishops of the Vatican who had killed Klinsmann. Although he had already put the blame on Yamu, Chi would never forget what the Vatican did. Of course, now was not the time for him to bring this to the surface. "Greetings, Your Highness the Pope. I took the liberty to come here. Please forgive me," Chi politely replied in a bureaucratic manner. Marty gestured to Chi. "Mr. Chi, please come in. The fact that you are willing to come to Vatican is already our greatest honor. If it weren't for you last time, I'm afraid that even Earth would have been destroyed, let alone us. Your contribution to the Earth cannot be measured by anything." Chi followed Marty into the palace. He didn't even sit down and went straight to the point. "Your Holiness, I'm here to ask for a favor." Marty was taken aback. "What? Did Mr. Chi encounter any difficulties? Actually, even if you didn't come, I would have wanted to find an opportunity to visit you. After all, your power is the strongest among us Earth Guardians. You also know that Earth is about to face the invasion of Hell. Only under your leadership can we fight against those creatures of Hell. Everyone in the Roman Curia will listen to your orders. I hope that Mr. Chi won't decline. Old fox, this old fox. Although he looks better than before, he's still very cunning." Letting him command the Vatican, to put it nicely, was nothing more than the fact that Hell would attack the West where the Vatican was located. By bringing him and the Zodiac guardian god warriors here, they would immediately become their helpers. This wishful thinking was really good. Although he understood it in his heart, Chi didn't show it on his face. "We'll talk about this later. I also know that Hell is about to descend, and even the Underworld's underworld king, Hades, will lead the Underworld's army to Earth. It's to be able to fight against them. That's why I came to the Vatican this time, hoping to get your help, Your Holiness." Marty's eyes lit up, and he said with a holy aura, "Praise the Emperor of Heaven. In the name of the Holy Father, the Holy Son, and the Holy Spirit, as long as we can do it, we will spare no effort to help you. Chiyu nodded and said, "That's good. Your Highness, please send me to the heaven realm." Marty looked at Chiyu dumbfounded. No matter how he thought about it, he never expected that Chiyu would make such a request to go to heaven. His expression immediately turned ugly because of Chiyu's request. Chiyu wasn't in a hurry. He just looked at Marty calmly, waiting for his answer. After a long time, Marty let out a long sigh and said, "Mr. Chi, may I know why you want to go to heaven? It is not an easy thing to go from our earth to the heavenly realm. Moreover, even if you can really go to heaven, it'll be difficult to come back. You are the strongest among the Earth Guardians. Without you, we will not be able to survive. Without you, how will we deal with the cruel Hell's powerhouses?" Chiyu smiled indifferently and said, "You don't have to worry about this. Since I dare to go, I'm confident that I can come back. I'll tell you for free. There are some special places in heaven that might help me increase my strength again. I've decided to go to heaven so that I can better help you fight against hell and the underworld in the future. Regardless of whether I succeed or not, I will come back. At that time, if something happens to the Vatican, our Zodiac Guardian will definitely help you if we can protect ourselves. Your Holiness, what do you think about this?" Marty's expression changed, and he fell into deep thought again. He was clearly thinking about whether helping Chiyu go to the heaven realm would be a good or bad thing for the church. After a while, Marty suddenly raised his head and said, "Mr. Chi, why are you so confident that you can return from heaven?" Chiyu smiled. He did not directly answer Marty's question, but instead said, "Your Holiness, what do you think of my current strength?" As he spoke, Chiyu put his hands behind his back, and 2 rays of divine light shot out from his eyes. A faint layer of energy completely enveloped him and the Pope. The Pope only felt his body tense up, as if his body had become 100 times heavier. At the same time, his mind instantly became blurry, and it seemed like every part of his body was no longer listening to his original commands. A loud shout came from Marty's mouth, and a golden light surged out, completely enveloping his body. Under the influence of the light, Marty's body looked like it was made of gold, and he looked extremely holy. Unfortunately, the golden light he released could only surround his body, and could only appear on the surface of his skin. He could not release it even if he wanted to. "Mr. Chiyu, what do you mean by this?" Sweat flowed down Marty's forehead. That incomparably huge pressure had already made him feel a little breathless. Chiyu smiled indifferently and said, "I don't mean anything. I just want your Holiness to evaluate my current strength. Very strong, even stronger than before. In my eyes, I can only use the word unfathomable to describe your current strength. It's not something I can fight against. Mr. Chi, please retract the pressure. Otherwise, I'm afraid I'll make a fool of myself," Marty said with a bitter smile. Naturally, Chiyu knew that Marty had not used his full strength, but it was enough for him. The pressure suddenly disappeared, and Marty felt his body lighten. The threat was gone. Chiyu said, "Your Holiness, I only released 30% of my strength just now. I think you used 60% of your strength to resist at most. However, to tell you the truth, what I just released was only my mental strength. Now you should understand the extent of my strength." Hearing Chiyu's words, Marty could not help but be shocked. "What? You've already surpassed the limits of God?" Chiyu shook his head and smiled. "No, I should say that I've surpassed the limits of God on earth. That's just the limit on earth. If you're willing to treat me as a god, I won't object. Actually, haven't you reached a strength close to that of a god? But that's not enough. It's far from enough if you want to fight against hell with your current strength. The reason I released my strength for you to see is to tell you that hell is extremely powerful. If you want to fight against them, you'll have to put in more effort. At the same time, I want to tell you that even if my strength goes to heaven, I can still return smoothly, just like how I can return from hell and the realm of gods. Marty stared blankly at Chiyu. He no longer had any thoughts of scheming against Chiyu. The man in front of him was too terrifying. Although Marty already understood this when Chiyu changed the asteroid's orbit, the feeling that Chiyu gave him now shocked him even more. He was a power that he could not resist at all. Even if the other 4 red-cloaked archbishops were here, he was not confident that they could do anything to Chiyu. In the face of absolute power, everything else was insignificant. You said that you've been to hell and the realm of gods? Chiyu nodded. That's right. I went to hell and even fought with Satan. Perhaps you should thank me. A small part of the core circle of hell where Satan was destroyed under my plan. I also killed some of the powerhouses of the Burning Legion. Even the 3 dreadlords died in my hand. Hell's strength has been weakened to a certain extent. The Pope could not believe his ears. A human, just a human, went to a plane like hell, and not only did he come back alive, he even told the Pope that he killed the 3 dreadlords and a large number of members of the Burning Legion. Was this really something that a human could do? However, he could tell from Chi-Yu's expression that he was not lying. That tyrannical gaze left no room for doubt. Then, Mr. Chi, can you defeat Satan? The Pope's gaze was now filled with hope. Chi-Yu shook his head. No, I can't. Satan's strength is stronger than you think. At least, I couldn't defeat him back then. His 12-winged strength is not something that I can fight against. However, if you can send me to the heavenly realm, if I can further improve my strength in the heavenly realm, then even if it's Satan, I have the confidence to defeat him. So, I came to Vatican. Now, Your Highness, please tell me directly if you can send me to the heavenly realm. After Marty recovered from his shock, he quickly calculated in his mind. Chi-Yu's strength was far beyond his expectations. Even without relying on the Zodiac Guardian warriors, he could still achieve such a level. That kind of strength was definitely not something that he could fight against. This was a critical time. Although he was the guardian of the East, and although he wanted to destroy him more, he could only choose to cooperate with him. However, in order to protect the Church, they could only choose to cooperate with him. After all, they could only rely on the power of this Eastern human to fight against Satan and Hades. After weighing the pros and cons, Marty slowly nodded. All right, Mr. Chi. I am willing to help you achieve your goal. However, you must also promise me, after you return from the heavenly realm, when the Curia is in trouble, you must lend a helping hand and help us resolve the crisis. Can you do that? You also know that the power of hell is definitely stronger than the underworld. And Miss Yumu is so powerful. Chapter 319. Alright, I understand what you mean. If there is a need, I will come to Vatican City to help you. However, Your Highness the Pope, you must be prepared. After all, it is impossible for a single person to stop Satan's burning legion. Chi-Yu was not a good person. At least, he did not think that he was a good person. He was the guardian of the East. In his heart, the most important thing was to protect the East and not any other place. He would help the Vatican and the Greek Guardian, but what Chi-Yu hoped for the most was that after all the evil forces were eliminated, the Vatican and the Greek Guardian would also be heroic. With a hint of joy on his face, Pope Marty, who was familiar with the Eastern etiquette, extended his right hand to Chi-Yu and said, "Then I will wait for your return. It's been a pleasure working with you." Chi-Yu extended his hand to shake Marty's. "It's been a pleasure working with you, Your Majesty Marty. Now, you can tell me what I need to do to go to heaven." Marty nodded and said, "Mr. Chi, please follow me." Under Marty's lead, they passed through 3 palaces and arrived at the innermost sanctum. There were 4 guards outside the sanctum. They were all wearing the armor of the Western Middle Ages. However, the 4 of them gave Chi-Yu a dangerous feeling. At his level, they still gave him a sense of danger. To be able to make him feel a sense of danger, it was obvious that these 4 gatekeepers possessed great power. A large hand embedded with steel suddenly extended and blocked Marty and Chi-Yu's path. Keepsake. The cold voice did not sound like it came from a human. Chi-Yu was surprised to find that he could feel an abnormally powerful soul energy from the armored man whose face could not be seen. However, he did not feel the presence of any life force. Malty was not angered by the Guardian's obstruction. Instead, he revealed a respectful expression, bowed and said, "Dear Holy Knights, the Celestial Emperor is with you." As he spoke, he reached into his pocket and solemnly took out a small sword that was only 3 inches long and handed it to the Holy Knight. The small golden sword released a special energy wave. Although the energy was not strong, it made the 4 Holy Knights take a step back. They did not make a sound, as if they were 4 statues. Marty turned around and nodded at Chi-Yu before walking inside. After they passed through a silver door, what appeared before him was a long and serene tunnel. There were no lights in the tunnel, and it was completely dark as far as the eye could see. Marty said gruffly, "Mr. Chi, this is the secret passageway to the Radiant Saint Hall. To our church, this is the greatest secret. I hope you won't tell anyone." Chi-Yu said calmly, "Don't worry, I'm not that bored." As he spoke, the 2 of them walked along the secret passage. As they walked, Chi-Yu asked, "Your Holiness the Pope, those 4 Holy Knights did not seem to be ordinary people. I didn't notice it before. Your church has such powerful experts. Why didn't you ask them to do anything for the church?" Marty smiled bitterly and said, "I know they are powerful, and I hope to borrow their strength. However, that is impossible, because they are not human, and they will not listen to my orders." Chi-Yu responded and continued walking. Marty hesitated for a moment and said, "Mr. Chi, aren't you going to ask me about their background? Are you not interested?" Chi-Yu shook his head and smiled. "No, I'm actually very interested. However, this is a secret of your church. If it's convenient, His Majesty will naturally tell me. Otherwise, it's useless for me to ask, isn't it?" Marty was stunned for a moment, but his expression quickly returned to normal. He sighed and said, "They actually do not belong to our world. They are the 4 divine soul warriors sent by the Emperor Heaven to assist the Church. Their status in the Church is transcendent. From the day the Church was established, the 4 divine soul warriors already existed. Even I don't know how powerful they are. I only know that during the most difficult period of the Church's establishment, it was these 4 divine soul warriors who helped the Church lay the foundation it has today." Chi-Yu smiled indifferently and said, "Your Holiness must be joking. Can't you feel that the strength of the 4 divine soul warriors has reached the peak of Earth?" The upgrade of the Thundercloud Force caused Chi-Yu's soul to grow to an unprecedented level. Although it was just a glance, Chi-Yu could clearly grasp the strength of the divine soul warriors. He could not help but be secretly surprised by the Church's strength. The 4 people from before were all stronger than the red-cloaked archbishops and could even be compared to Marty. It was no wonder that the Church was able to maintain a dominant position on Earth. They were indeed extraordinary. Marty did not say anything else. The strength that Chi-Yu had displayed previously had a huge impact on him. Although it was important for him to believe in the Emperor Heaven, it was equally important for him to hold onto the big tree that was Chi-Yu. At this time, he would definitely not offend Chi-Yu. However, how could he possibly know that deep in Chi-Yu's heart, he was actually equal to Yamu? If it was not for the impending crisis, perhaps Chi-Yu would have already attacked him. In the eyes of Chi-Yu, these Western Guardians were only enemies. After passing through the secret passage, Chi-Yu followed Marty to a room. At the end of the secret passage, there was only this room. The room was very small. It was only about 20 square meters. The entire room was pitch black. If it was not for Chi-Yu's amazing eyesight, he would not have been able to see anything in here. Golden light shone from Marty's body. The light flickered and illuminated everything in the room. There was a black cross floating in the air inside the room. When Malty's holy aura shone on the cross, a black cross floated in the air. When the holy aura from Marty's body shone on the cross, the original black was quickly dyed with golden light, filling the entire room with a holy aura. On the front there was a huge statue. It was completely carved out of milky white jade, and a special aura of energy was constantly being released from the statue. Through Chi Yu's senses, he realized that although the energy released from the statue was not strong, it was filled with the aura of a soul. The statue was of a woman with a very good figure. On her back there were 12 wings spread open. Both of her hands were up and down, each making a strange gesture. Although it was just a statue, it gave off a feeling that it was alive. The other parts of the room were carved with many complicated symbols. These symbols all had one thing in common: they seemed to be a whole, emitting a mysterious aura of energy. However, they were able to hide their own energy very well. As for the statue, it was the core of these strange symbols. Marty walked to the bottom of the cross, bowed to the statue, and muttered a few words in a special language. Chi Yu could not understand. "Mr. Chi," Marty turned around and looked at Chi Yu, "this is the location of the highest secret of the Holy See. It is called the Prayer Room. It is the place where the past popes and the Emperor of Heaven got in touch. You are the first outsider to come here." Chi Yu nodded and said, "I understand what you mean. Don't worry, I won't tell anyone. Can we start now?" Marty nodded and said, "Please wait a moment. I need to ask the Emperor of Heaven's will before I can decide." As he spoke, the Pope turned around and faced the statue again. He kept chanting incantations. The golden light that was released from his body gradually turned milky white, just like the statue in front of him. The holy aura continued to rise. In just a short while, Marty's energy waves had risen to the peak of what he could achieve. The room was small to begin with, but it was filled with such a huge amount of energy. Naturally, every inch of the space was filled with holy aura. Chi Yu stood there. He did not need to activate his own energy at all. A faint layer of energy flowed out and floated on his skin. Although the holy aura was huge, it did not affect him at all. The Pope suddenly chanted something in a loud voice. The statue in front of him suddenly lit up. The statue's eyes instantly shot out 2 rays of golden light, which overlapped with the Pope's eyes. The Pope's body trembled violently. Soon, his body stopped moving, and a special aura appeared on his body. It felt as if the soul of the statue had entered his body. The energy in the entire room turned into a cycle. Chi Yu stood there and waited quietly. At the same time, it would not be his style if he did not take advantage of such a rich holy aura. The energy of the source of nature quietly circulated, and the holy energy from the outside world was slowly absorbed by Chi Yu. Back then, he had worked with the Pope once, so Chi Yu knew that the holy energy of the Vatican had a certain photosynthetic effect on the source of nature, and could increase the strength of the source of nature's energy to a certain extent. The Pope was obviously communicating with the heavenly realm. He was not in a hurry. Under the influence of the holy energy here, he began to cultivate his source of nature. He also increased the intensity of his source of nature's energy and channeled it into the Kongtong seal to better assist his companions in their cultivation. After half an hour, the golden light connecting the Pope and the statue gradually disappeared. Letting out a long breath, Marty's expression returned to normal, and the holy aura on his body automatically retracted. "Mr. Chi, the Emperor of Heaven has agreed. He has agreed to let you go to the heavenly realm to search for the energy you need," Marty said to Chi Yu as if a heavy burden had been lifted from his shoulders. Chi Yu nodded and said, "Then let us begin." "Wait a minute," Marty said. "Although the Emperor of Heaven has agreed to let you go to the heavenly realm, Mr. Chi, we are helping you, and at the same time, we hope that you will help us in the future. I wonder if we can form an unwavering alliance? Threaten?" Chi Yu glanced at the Supreme Pontiff and smiled faintly. "Your Highness, haven't I already agreed? I will help you as much as I can. Isn't this what it means to be an ally?" Marty hurriedly said, No, that's not what I mean. What I mean is, can you please sign a treaty with the Vatican? This way, it will be more convenient for us to work together in the future. Naturally, Chiyu understood what Marty meant. The Pope was obviously worried about him, but from his point of view, it was nothing. The meaning of an ally was too broad. How could it bind him? Sure. However, I will not sign this treaty with the Vatican. If you want to sign it, only your Emperor of Heaven has the right to do so. The pressure appeared again, and Marty did not even have time to react before his body bent under the immense pressure. Facing Chi Yu's powerful aura, Marty knew that if he did not help him to go to the heavenly realm, no one could say what this Eastern man would do. Of course, that's for sure. A powerhouse like you should naturally be under the command of His Majesty Emperor of Heaven. Alright, I will send you to the heavenly realm now. Please be careful on your journey. The pressure was lifted with the Pope's words. A faint light flickered, and Marty quickly drew a golden hexagram in front of his chest. The cross in the air began to spin, and a powerful holy aura was released in an instant, pushing away everything around it. At the same time, the statue released a layer of milky white light. As the light flickered, the cross in the air began to emit strong energy waves. Space was torn. That was what Chiyu felt. His previous 2 trips to Hell and the Divine Realm, his spiritual force was not strong enough. However, the current him was far stronger than before. He could clearly feel the energy of space tearing. This process could not be completed immediately. After all, tearing space required an incomparably large amount of energy. Ling'er used a special magic artifact to bring him to Hell, while Yamu's energy collided with his, creating a huge energy wave that sent him to the Divine Realm. If Marty wanted to tear space, he would need to borrow the energy in this room, and at the same time, he would need to constantly release his own energy to do so. However, Chiyu did not have the patience to continue waiting. Your Majesty the Pope, let me help you. Chiyu moved. He raised his hands, and his eyes instantly turned golden. Shortly after, a layer of greenish-golden light appeared on his palms. The cross in the air had disappeared, and a black hole the size of a fist was revealed. However, when Chiyu raised his hands, the black hole seemed to have stopped. Open, Chiyu shouted. He suddenly separated his hands, and the entire room trembled violently. The black hole the size of a fist was forcefully torn apart by Chiyu, revealing a hole that was large enough for a person to pass through. In a flash of light, Chiyu's figure had already disappeared. Marty stared dumbfoundedly at the crack that was slowly closing up. He muttered to himself, "Oh my God! Is this really the power of a human?" He had actually reached the level of being able to tear space, which was something that even His Majesty the Sky Emperor couldn't do. It seems that I still underestimated his power. Tearing space did not only require a large amount of energy, but also a sense of space. Tearing space to another plane required one's energy and mental strength to reach unprecedented height. Only with the guidance of the soul and the coordinates could it be done. Marty had already provided the coordinate. With his thundercloud force, which was close to the 9th cloud level, Chiyu easily tore space apart and entered the passage to another plane. It was no different from the previous 2 transmigrations. The process of transmigration did not affect Chiyu at all. When the pressure around him weakened, he knew that he had arrived at the so-called Heaven Realm. It was all white and misty. It was as if he was in the clouds. The energy aura around him was exceptionally refreshing. Compared to the heavenly realm, the holy aura here seemed to be slightly weaker. However, there was a touch of the soul. The thundercloud force operated, dispersing the surrounding clouds. At this moment, he saw a pair of birdmen flying in his direction. The leader. It was the Angel of Flames, Raphael, who had fought with his clone on Earth. Behind Raphael there were more than 10 angels. They were only 2-winged angels. The energy waves did not attract Chiyu's attention at all. "Hello, Mr. Chi." It's a pleasure to have you visit the heaven realm. The Emperor of Heaven is waiting for you. Please follow me. Raphael seemed to have forgotten that Chiyu had destroyed his clone. He spoke to Chiyu very politely. Chiyu nodded and said, "Please lead the way." Raphael spread the 6 pure white wings on his back and floated up. He led the angels under him and flew in a certain direction. Chiyu flew behind him while observing the surrounding scenery. When he was in the heavenly realm, he did not pay much attention to it. However, there were obvious differences between the heavenly realm and the heavenly realm. The heavenly realm was like earth filled with a holy aura. It also had mountains and rivers. Everything was not too different from earth. The only difference was the aura. However, the heavenly realm was different. The ground under his feet could not be seen. Everywhere was white and misty. Moreover, this seemed to be a flat space. There were no mountains and rivers like in the heavenly realm. As far as the eye could see, everything was just white. Raphael did not talk to Chiyu. After flying for about half an hour on Earth, he brought Chiyu to a stop. The white fog in front of them slowly dispersed. A golden palace appeared in front of Chiyu. The palace was extremely majestic. At least, it was the largest palace that Chiyu had ever seen. The entire palace was more than 300 meters tall. It was a classical European architectural style. The entire palace exuded a calm aura. In front of the palace, there were at least hundreds of angels guarding it. Except for a few individuals, most of the angels only had wings. This is the temple where the Emperor of Heaven is. Mr. Chi, please. Raphael made a gesture to Chiyu. The angels who originally followed him did not seem to have the authority to enter here. They quietly dispersed. Chiyu followed Raphael and walked into the temple where the Emperor of Heaven was. The area of the temple was as large as its height. At least, that was what Chiyu felt. Under Raphael's lead, they walked at least a kilometer before they saw another huge door of the main hall. Along the way, Chiyu discovered that there were not many angels in this temple. However, they were at least 4-winged. Raphael could see the doubts in Chiyu's heart. He smiled and said, "In heaven, angels are differentiated by the number of wings they have. Angels with only 2 wings cannot enter the temple. Only those with 4 wings and above can enter the temple to serve His Majesty the Emperor of Heaven. At the 6-winged seraphim realm, we can become archangels and be valued by His Majesty. You have already met the archangels before." Chiyu nodded and said, "Is the Emperor of Heaven inside?" Raphael said, "Yes, His Majesty is inside waiting for Mr. Chi's arrival. Please." As he spoke, he took the lead to walk in front of the huge door. A layer of golden light was released from the Angel of Light. The huge door that was 100 meters tall slowly opened. Chiyu discovered that the Raphael he had fought on Earth was very different from the one he had fought now. The Angel of Light here was far more powerful than the one he had faced in the past. Even the Pope's strength could not compare to him. Compared to the Dreadlord of Hell, the 6-winged seraphim of the heaven realm was obviously stronger than him. This was the complete opposite of what Chiyu knew. It seemed that the strength of the heaven was not that simple. The temple, the central temple of the heaven, was also known as the Emperor of Heaven Temple. This was the place where the Emperor of Heaven handled all matters of the heaven. As soon as he walked in, Chiyu immediately felt a huge pressure. It was the same pressure he felt in front of the Demon King's castle in hell. It was the pressure of the element. After all, he did not have the holy energy of the heaven. Just like how he was suppressed by the dark energy, his body was also suppressed to a certain extent. Raising his head, he saw that the huge temple was completely empty. In the innermost part of the temple, there was a person sitting on a high throne. It was a woman. The 12 pure white wings on her back indicated her identity. Compared to the statue in the Pope's secret room, the real Emperor of Heaven was much more beautiful, especially the holy aura she released that made people unable to look at her directly. It was something that Chi Yu had never seen on any woman, not even Yumu. In this aspect, he could not compare to her. The remaining seraphim under the Emperor of Heaven were all present, led by the Angel of Battle Michael and the Angel of Death Gabriel. Their eyes were now focused on Chi Yu. It's my honor to have such a lineup to receive me. Chi Yu, who was momentarily dazed because of the Emperor of Heaven's radiance, quickly regained his senses. He took a few steps forward and bowed slightly to the Emperor of Heaven. A strange light flashed in the Emperor of Heaven's eyes. Are you the powerful guardian of the East that Marty mentioned? Chi Yu smiled indifferently and said, Your Majesty can call me by my name. Chi Yu. The Emperor of Heaven stood up from her seat and slowly walked towards Chi Yu. She was very tall and had perfect proportions. Her height was about the same as Chi Yu's, and the 12 wings on her back had an extra layer of pale golden light. An unfathomable feeling was released from her body. It was the same as when Chi Yu first met Satan. Even the degree of energy suppression was the same. However, the current Chi Yu was no longer the Chi Yu who went to hell. Silver light was released from Chi Yu's body. He still stood there with his back straight. No matter how much pressure the Emperor of Heaven exerted, his body did not change in the slightest. As expected, you have surpassed the limits that Earth has on humans. You have reached the same level as me. I couldn't have predicted that an expert like you would appear on Earth. I wonder if you can tell me the source of your power? The Emperor of Heaven looked at Chi Yu with curiosity in her eyes. If it was not because Chi Yu knew that she was as old as the birth of humans, he might have been fooled by her innocent expression. Your Majesty, you shouldn't be asking me this. You already know that I come from the East. My power is naturally bestowed by the East, isn't it? Chi Yu replied in a manner that was neither servile nor overbearing. After his strength increased again, he had completely placed himself on the same level as Satan and the Emperor of Heaven in front of him. Status needed to be supported by strength. This was something that Chi Yu understood very well. At this moment, in this world, there was nothing that he needed to be afraid of. Even Old Ox. At most, he could only defeat him, but he could not make Chi Yu's fighting spirit yield. Power from the East? Power from the East? The Emperor of Heaven frowned slightly as if she thought of something. The light in her eyes became sharper. Malti has told me everything about you. What do you want from the heavenly realm? Chi Yu. I think that as long as you bring me to the passage between heaven and earth, I will know what kind of power I want. The Emperor of Heaven's expression changed. Are you going to return to earth through the passage? That's impossible. Even I can't pass through there. Chi Yu smiled indifferently and said, Just because you can't pass through doesn't mean that I can't. Just like how Satan can't go to earth through the passage to hell, I did it. How dare you? The blazing angels shouted angrily at the same time. A huge energy wave instantly enveloped Chi Yu's body. Chi Yu revealed a trace of disdain at the corner of his mouth. He raised his right hand and made a very natural movement. A soft sound came from his hand, but nothing happened. Chi Yu took a step forward and walked out of the huge pressure, just like that. The blazing angels' energy lock on him didn't have any effect. They couldn't even attack Chi Yu immediately. This was because the spiritual aura that they had locked on to Chi Yu was still at the position where Chi Yu was just now. The Emperor of Heaven was moved. Tearing space. You actually have the power to tear space. Yes, Chi Yu relied on the tearing space. He had just learned to calmly walk out of the energy lock of the 6 blazing angels. Your Majesty, I think that we are on the same side when it comes to facing the invasion of hell and the underworld. None of us knows what will happen in the upcoming battle. However, the more power we have on Earth, the better we will be able to resist the threat of hell. So, I'm here. Your Majesty, please help me. The Emperor of Heaven looked at Chi Yu and said, So, you're willing to help us deal with Satan? Chi Yu shook his head and said, No, Your Majesty, you're not completely right. I'm not helping you. I'm just protecting what I should be protecting. Your Majesty, please take me to the channel. I hope that I can get the energy I need there. I'm afraid that the day of the alignment of the 9 stars is not far away. The Emperor of Heaven nodded slowly and waved his hand to make the blazing angels who wanted to gather back. Chi-Yu, are you really just a human? Why hasn't there been a human as powerful as you in the Vatican? Chi-Yu smiled indifferently and said, perhaps this is the difference between the East and the West. We don't have a god in the East, so we need to create a god. Otherwise, won't we be assimilated by the West? The Emperor of Heaven smiled sweetly and said, you make me feel threatened. It's been many years. The last time I felt threatened was when Satan brought his aura during the war between gods and demons. You're very powerful. I really want to keep you in the heaven forever. Chi-Yu was not afraid of the Emperor of Heaven's words at all. He smiled and said, unfortunately, this is just your opinion. Indeed, with the combined power of you and the 6 blazing angels, you're definitely stronger than me. However, you can only defeat me. It's impossible for you to keep me here. What's more, it's far more beneficial for you to stay on Earth, isn't it? You'd rather use me to deal with hell, and hell is something I have to deal with. So, in a sense, we're standing on the same side. Your Majesty, Emperor of Heaven, please. The Emperor of Heaven looked at Chi-Yu with a little more confusion. After a long while, she nodded gently and said, well, I'll help you. I hope you won't forget what you promised Malti. The 12 wings on his back suddenly expanded rapidly. The wings, which were originally only 2 meters long, instantly spread to more than 10 meters long. The 12 wings closed at the same time, enveloping Chi-Yu. The white wings formed a huge cocoon, and Chi-Yu and the Emperor of Heaven were included in it. Chapter 320. Chi-Yu smiled bitterly. Your Majesty, you should know how your appearance and body rank in the human world. I'm just a normal man. Emperor of Heaven sighed. Mr. Chi, there's only the 2 of us here. I'd like to ask you for a favor. As long as you're willing to help me, even if you return to Earth and face attacks from Hell and the Underworld, you don't have to fulfill your promise to Marty. You just have to protect yourself. Chi-Yu's eyes revealed a trace of surprise. The reason why he was certain that Marty would send him to the Heaven Realm was because he was of great value to the Church. He had the same thought when he faced the Emperor of Heaven. However, the Emperor of Heaven seemed to be telling him that the Vatican did not really need his help. What is it? If I can do it? Chi-Yu asked. The Sky Emperor suddenly lowered his head and let out a long sigh. You should know that although the heavenly realm is very powerful, it can't leave this plane. Even if I want to go against Hell, it's almost impossible. The 9-star alignment will open a passage between Hell and Earth. 1,000 years after the 9-star alignment, another passage will be opened. It has nothing to do with Earth, but it will open a passage between heaven and hell. However, that passage has its own characteristic. Only super powerhouses like you and me can pass through it. Chi-Yu's heart skipped a beat. He understood what the Emperor of Heaven meant. You're saying that you'll fight Satan 1,000 years later? Emperor of Heaven nodded. That's right. That's right. That's why I need your help. Chi-Yu frowned. I'm just a human. Even if I can live for 1,000 years, I'm afraid that space will change. It'll be a problem for me to come to your plane, let alone help you. Although I can promise you perfunctorily, I won't do that. The Emperor of Heaven smiled. Her beautiful face, which was filled with a sacred aura, suddenly blushed. She shook her head and said, No. You're wrong. I don't want you to help me fight. I still had some confidence in my own strength. Even if I couldn't defeat Satan, I definitely wouldn't lose to him. This was the balance between hell and heaven. However, the battle between me and Satan will most likely end in a lose-lose situation. And this matter, only Satan and I know. At that time, if Satan and I die because of the degree of injury, I'm afraid. After all, the heaven realm needed a strong leader. Satan has a daughter. If Satan dies, she can also inherit Satan's position, But in our heaven realm, there is no such thing. I will always be alone. Therefore, before the final battle with Satan, I must groom a successor. Do you understand what I mean? No, I don't understand what this has to do with me. Chi Yu looked at the Emperor of Heaven. Although he had already thought of something in his heart, he would never say it out loud at this moment. The celestial Dharch replied shyly, I want you to help me. I need a child. I need a child to be my successor. What? Chi Yu exclaimed. Even when he was facing the 6 blazing angels and the Emperor of Heaven, he wasn't this excited. Looking at the shy look of the Emperor of Heaven, his mind couldn't help but go blank. Could it be that the dignified Sky Emperor actually wanted to borrow his seed? This was too ridiculous. The Emperor of Heaven lowered his head and said, It is extremely difficult for high-ranking people like us to have a child of our own. Back then, Satan had gone through a lot of trouble to have his daughter, but I had never come across a suitable opportunity. You are very powerful. Although you are only a human, your strength has even surpassed that of an ordinary god. Therefore, I need your help. Is it possible? As long as you are willing to help me, in the future, the child we create together will become the successor of the heaven realm, and you can also become a father. From now on, as long as you need help from the heaven realm or the Vatican, we will help you without any conditions. What do you think? A beautiful woman came to his door, or rather, sent to his bed, with such good conditions. Any man would probably not be able to refuse. However, Chi Yu was after all not an ordinary person. Looking at the Emperor of Heaven in front of him, whose appearance was definitely not inferior to Yamu's, he couldn't help but feel a chill in his heart. Could this be a conspiracy of the heaven realm? After all, when he was with Yamu, he had already suffered too much. He would never make the same mistake again. I'm sorry, I'm afraid I can't promise you. I already have a wife, I can't betray my wife, Chi Yu said sternly. In fact, his heart was already a little shaken, but he could still reluctantly stick to his principles. This time, it was the Emperor of Heaven's turn to be surprised. You helping me to give birth to a child, what does that have to do with your wife? It has no relation at all. Chi Yu looked at the Emperor of Heaven dumbfounded and asked tentatively, You said that you want me to help you to give birth to a child, how do you do that? The Emperor of Heaven said, It's like this. In our heaven realm, if we want to give birth to the next generation, we need a huge amount of energy. If I just want to give birth to an ordinary child, my own strength is enough. However, my child must inherit my current position in the future, so he must also have the same strength as me. At the very least, after a long period of cultivation, he must be able to reach my current level. Therefore, I don't have enough energy. I've already used my own energy to create his body, but it's also because of this that I've expended a lot of energy. I can only allow him to inherit my divine sense, but I don't have enough energy to give him life. But you have the world's most mystical origin of nature energy, so I want to borrow some of your origin of nature energy. Inject life into my child, and help me successfully give birth to the successor of this heaven realm. Chi Yu smiled bitterly in his heart. It turned out that he had misunderstood. Fortunately, he didn't say anything excessive just now, otherwise he would have lost a lot of face. Looking at the Emperor of Heaven's expectant gaze, he nodded and said, I can help you with this matter. Then what do I need to do? The blush on the Emperor of Heaven's pretty face became more obvious. You need to inject the power of life directly into my child. Give him real life, and you will be the father of this child. As she spoke, a layer of white light was released from her body, and the 12 wings on her back quietly separated, still maintaining the appearance of the big cocoon just now, surrounding the two in the center. Slowly taking a few steps forward, the Emperor of Heaven shyly came in front of Chi Yu. I know such a request is a little abrupt, but I have no other way. After all, in this world, only you have the origin of nature energy. If I miss this opportunity, I am afraid I will not be able to find the same energy in the future. Therefore, I must ask for your help. I need you to inject the origin of nature energy into my lower abdomen and combine it with the child I created. After having vitality, in the near future, he will be able to be born." As she spoke, the Emperor of Heaven pulled up Chi Yu's right hand, gritted her teeth, and directly stuffed it into her clothes, letting Chi Yu's hot hand stick to her lower abdomen. Chi Yu didn't feel anything. The smooth and warm skin of the Emperor of Heaven gave him a very comfortable feeling, but the Emperor of Heaven's body trembled. She had existed for tens of thousands of years, but this was the first time a man touched her body. How could she not be excited? A faint light lit up from her body. This time, it was no longer white light, but a pale golden airflow, surrounding Chi Yu's body. Chi Yu asked, "Your Majesty, Emperor of Heaven, what should I do now?" The Emperor of Heaven almost relied on Chi Yu's right hand to support her weight. That strange feeling that she had never felt before continued to spread to every part of her body. You only need to inject the energy of the origin of nature into my lower abdomen. You will feel a soft energy there. That is our child. Please bring the breath of life to him. Leave your life mark in his body, and then use the energy of the origin of nature to nourish his breath of life. Don't worry. I know that this will consume a certain amount of energy. I will use my own divine power to replenish your body. Through your energy conversion, you can completely maintain the strength of your energy." As she spoke, she slowly raised her head. Her pretty face revealed a trace of a pleading expression. Chi Yu didn't say anything more, just nodded quietly. The energy of the origin of nature quietly flowed out, the warm airflow, along his right palm, directly into the body of the Emperor of Heaven. In fact, the Emperor of Heaven chose Chi Yu because she had no other choice. It was too difficult for her to give birth to a child who could inherit her throne in the future. Otherwise, she wouldn't have waited until today. After Chi Yu came to the Heaven realm, the Emperor of Heaven immediately felt his powerful energy. It was something she had never felt before. She even felt that the human in front of her was stronger than her, and his body actually had the energy of the origin of nature that she needed the most. With this, her child could be born smoothly, inherit her and his excellent genes, and in the future, it was very likely that the child's achievements would be above her. Therefore, she had to let go of the shyness in her heart, and face Chi Yu with a pleading tone. In order to have a child, he was even willing to give up the forces that the Heaven realm had painstakingly built up on Earth. Chi Yu was not afraid that the Emperor of Heaven would harm him. After reaching his current strength, he had the ability to completely lock on to his own energy. Moreover, he was now in his perfect state. If the Emperor of Heaven wanted to forcibly absorb his origin of nature energy and breath of life like Yamu, then the result would only be the consequences of his own actions. The Emperor of Heaven absolutely understood this. After all, they were super strong people of the same level. Therefore, while slowly transferring the origin of nature energy into the Emperor of Heaven's body, Chi Yu used his own mental strength to guard his body. The Emperor of Heaven did not lie to him. Just as he had said before, he released his own divine power, and the gentle divine power was directly injected into Chi Yu's body, replenishing the consumption of the origin of nature energy. Unknowingly, the Emperor of Heaven's delicate body had already stuck to Chi Yu's body. Her hands were pressed on Chi Yu's back and chest, so that her divine power could be better output. Under the supervision of Chi Yu's mental strength, if she wanted to do anything abnormal, she would definitely be the one who would be hurt. After all, Chi Yu's strongest right hand was on her lower abdomen. Under the control of Chi Yu's mental strength, the origin of nature energy quickly found the ball of energy that the Emperor of Heaven had mentioned. Chi Yu was surprised to find that the ball of energy was extremely powerful, and at least 70% of the Emperor of Heaven's energy aura was concentrated in this ball of energy, but it was not injected, but nurtured. It seemed like this was the method that the Emperor of Heaven used to give birth to a child. Just as the Emperor of Heaven had said, Although the ball of energy she had condensed already had an extremely large amount of energy, and even had a part of the Emperor of Heaven's consciousness, there was no aura of life. If it had been in the past, it would have been extremely difficult for Chi-Yu to leave his life imprint on this child. This was because doing so was very likely to destroy his own life imprint, and there would be irreparable consequences. However, it was different now. His soul had been raised to an unprecedented height in the process of upgrading the wind thundercloud force, and under the effect of the soul, he could completely engrave his life imprint on the little life that the Emperor of Heaven was giving birth to, so that it could inherit his life aura. This was something that even Chi-Yu did not expect. Everything was done so easily, as if the conditions were right. The whole process of engraving the life imprint did not change at all, and Chi-Yu easily made the child that had the Emperor of Heaven's consciousness have his own life aura. Feeling that the child's life force was constantly increasing, Chi-Yu suddenly had a strange feeling. Although he had 5 female confidants, including Wen-Ting, there were 6. However, Kiran's ability in that aspect was very strong, but the probability of giving birth to a child was very low. Therefore, although he had slept with Ryue and Snow Girl, there had never been any signs of pregnancy. At this moment, when he engraved his life imprint on the Emperor of Heaven's body, the feeling of creating life made him feel the joy of becoming a father for the first time, and the light in his eyes suddenly became a lot gentler. The life imprint was finally completed. Chi-Yu did not know how long it took him. He only knew that under his full effort, the life imprint that was engraved was without the slightest flaw, and could be said to be his most perfect work. When his mental strength returned to his body, Chi-Yu was filled with a feeling of gratification. At this moment, he suddenly felt that the divine power that the Emperor of Heaven had injected into him was slowly weakening. Opening his eyes, Chi-Yu saw the Emperor of Heaven's painful expression, and the energy aura on her body had become very unstable, much weaker than before. After a simple scan with his mental strength, Chi-Yu immediately understood. In order to give birth to this child, the celestial Dharch had already expended more than 70% of her divine power. On the surface, she looked like a powerful celestial Dharch, but most of her powerful energy was in the child. When he used his soul to engrave the life imprint in her body, it had a great impact on her own energy, and she needed to constantly inject divine power into herself to maintain her peak state. Even if she was the Emperor of Heaven, under such a heavy consumption, it was already a little difficult for her to bear. Let go. I'm fine. Chi-Yu slowly injected the energy of the source of nature into the Emperor of Heaven's body, and at the same time, used his own energy to shake off her hands. The Emperor of Heaven opened her eyes in panic and looked at Chi-Yu. What she saw was a pair of eyes filled with a gentle aura. My energy is enough to support all of this. Since I am the father of this child, I should also do something for the child. How can I let your energy support it alone? Feel my energy, open your body and mind, and give everything to me, okay? Although it was only a one-time encounter. Although the Emperor of Heaven had put forward such an unimaginable condition, Chi-Yu could fully feel the Emperor of Heaven's desire to be a mother, that kind of motherly feeling. It touched him. At this time, he no longer had any defense against the Emperor of Heaven. If a woman, especially a woman like the Emperor of Heaven, dared to deceive him at the cost of her own child, then, did she still deserve everything she had now? A faint light flickered. Chi-Yu did not say anything more, and the energy output of the source of nature in his body suddenly increased. This time, it was not only to nourish the life imprint that had just been engraved. At the same time, it was also nourishing her body, and huge energy fluctuations were constantly being released. For Chi-Yu, it did not cause too much of a burden. The Emperor of Heaven's lower abdomen gradually became hot under the effect of his huge energy of the source of nature, and the large amount of energy that she had previously consumed was rapidly recovering under the support of Chi-Yu. Closing his eyes, the power of his soul was completely released, and mixed with his spiritual power. At this moment, for the first time, Qi Yu completely released his strength after upgrading the thundercloud force. It could be said that he was now carrying out huge consumption in three aspects. On the one hand, he had to constantly inject the energy of the source of nature into the Kontong seal to assist his companions in their cultivation. On the other hand, he also had to nourish the Emperor of Heaven and her child with the energy of the source of nature. If it were anyone else, perhaps no one would be able to bear such a huge consumption, but Qi Yu was able to bear it. Under the effect of the combination of the soul and spiritual power, he absorbed the energy of the heavenly realm at an unprecedented speed and then transformed it into the energy of the source of nature itself. The involvement of the soul further increased the speed of his absorption of energy. His body became a transfer station of the cycle, constantly condensing a huge amount of energy and continuously releasing it. It was like a special cultivation method. At this time, the 6 seraphim were guarding outside the huge 12 wings. They had received instructions from the Emperor of Heaven, and were now nervously watching the white wings in front of them. In the beginning, they could only feel the huge amount of energy, but at this time, the energy had changed. The originally white 12 wings of the Emperor of Heaven had now become the color of emerald, full of vitality of the source of nature, giving them an unprecedented feeling of comfort. At the same time, they could clearly feel the holy energy in the heavenly realm rushing towards the 12 wings. Although they did not know what was happening, they could only continue to guard here. Time passed day by day. Qi Yu and the God King had already stayed in the giant wings for a total of 49 days. To them, it might only be a moment, but to the seraphim waiting outside, it felt like 49 years had passed. Just when the 6 seraphim were getting a little impatient, the emerald light in front of them suddenly disappeared. Then, a huge amount of energy surged in an instant. The 12 wings spread out in an instant, and incomparably surging energy blew the 6 of them back 100 meters. That was a huge amount of energy that could not be resisted. In the next moment, the 6 seraphim's eyes widened, and they could not believe what they saw. The Emperor of Heaven closed her eyes, and her face revealed a completely blissful light. She lay in Qi Yu's arms, her hands wrapped around his waist, and the 12 wings on her back flapped gently, returning to their original size. At the same time, the energy aura on her body seemed to have become stronger than before. The light on her face also had a bit more motherly and holy light. Qi Yu was still standing there, his body releasing a silver light. Like the Emperor of Heaven, his face was also filled with the light of happiness. He looked down at the Emperor of Heaven in his arms, as if he was thinking about something. Michael and Gabriel looked at each other and asked in a low voice, "What's going on? Why would Her Majesty and this human?" Gabriel shook his head with a bitter smile and said, "How would I know? You ask me, but who am I going to ask?" Qi Yu slowly raised his head and said softly, "I have done what I promised you. I think there should be no more problems. If my feeling is right, he will be born in a year at most." The Emperor of Heaven stood up from Qi Yu's arms reluctantly, loosened his hands and said chokingly, "Thank you, Qi Yu, thank you for giving me what I want the most." Qi Yu shook his head and said, "No, you have sacrificed much more than I have. Moreover, this is our child, isn't it? I have to go. Although your energy has basically recovered, try not to move around as much as possible. Don't worry about the baby. You don't have to worry about the things on Earth. I think I have the ability to handle everything. To be honest, I have never liked the Vatican. When the time comes, if I do something, I hope you can understand." The Emperor of Heaven smiled. "As I said, as long as you do me this favor, the Vatican will only be your help in the future. From now on, the Vatican will only be your helper. As for how you want to deal with them, I will not interfere. After all, when the 9-star alignment comes, the connection between the Vatican and us will also be completely cut off. However, after the 9-star alignment ends, when you have time, can you come to see our child again? Yes, I will. Chi-Yu looked at the Emperor of Heaven gently. Although he and the Emperor of Heaven did not have a physical relationship, but listening to the heartbeat of the little life in her lower abdomen, which was exactly the same rhythm as his, Chi-Yu had already regarded the Emperor of Heaven in front of him as a family member. At this moment, the whole heaven suddenly shook violently without warning. Chi-Yu and the Emperor of Heaven changed their expressions at the same time and looked up into the sky. The sky, which was originally filled with white light, had begun to darken at some point, and the speed at which it dimmed was increasing at an unprecedented rate. The Emperor of Heaven suddenly changed his expression and said, "Not good, the 9-star alignment is going to appear. Chi-Yu, hurry up and leave. Otherwise, you won't be able to leave." 49 days passed. The 9-star alignment was finally going to appear. At this moment, the hearts of Chi-Yu and the Emperor of Heaven could not help but sink. The Emperor of Heaven took Chi-Yu's hand without saying anything and flew quickly towards a direction of the heaven realm under the protection of the 6 blazing angels. At the same time, layers of white light were constantly released from her body, which slowed down the spreading speed of the black in the air. When the Emperor of Heaven brought Chi-Yu to a pool, she stopped. The white mist dispersed, revealing a clear but bottomless pool of water. "Is it here?" Chi-Yu asked. The Emperor of Heaven nodded and said, "Yes. You want to return to Earth. You need to go through this pool to do so. Your current energy." Chi-Yu smiled and said, "Don't worry, my energy is not a problem. Unfortunately, I'm afraid there is no time for me to absorb the water elements here." The Emperor of Heaven sighed and said, "It's all because of me that your matter has been delayed. Actually, even if you have time, you can't absorb the energy you want now. The 9-star alignment has already caused the energy aura of the whole heaven realm to change. Hurry up and leave, I can't hold on for too long. You must leave here immediately, otherwise it will be too late." Chi-Yu didn't say anything more and floated up. Blue light gushed out from his body and the water thundercloud force wrapped around his body. Like an arrow, he shot towards the deep pool. The Emperor of Heaven's voice sounded, "Chi-Yu, I have already arranged for a powerful force to be in the Vatican. The Pope and the 4 red-robed archbishops have inherited the divine power I released. As long as they can fully use it, they will pose a great threat to hell. If you can't do it on your side, you don't have to help them." Chi-Yu's body slightly paused. "Don't worry, I have my own plans. Goodbye, mother of the child." "Farewell, father." The 6 blazing angels bowed towards the direction of the pool. At this moment, they naturally understood what had happened before. "Father? I have become the father?" Chi-Yu had a slightly pleased smile on his face as he dived into the deep pool. Suddenly, he felt a familiar aura. This deep pool was actually very similar to the frigid spring from before. However, the energy here was much stronger. Unfortunately, the energy here was already somewhat distorted, probably due to the influence of the 9-star alignment. There was no more time to think. Chi-Yu fully activated the water thundercloud force in his body. With the help of the energy of the origin of nature, he quickly dived into the deep pool. Earth. Vatican City. Pope Marty stood in front of the Divangan shrine. At this moment, the 4 red-robed archbishops and a large number of clergymen of the Vatican were behind him. Everyone was silently chanting difficult incantations, while Marty's gaze remained fixed in midair. He knew that what was coming had finally come. Chapter 321. Pope Marty stood in front of the Divangan shrine. At this moment, 4 red-robed archbishops and a large number of clergymen of the Vatican were behind him. Everyone was silently chanting difficult incantations, while Marty's gaze remained fixed in midair. He understood that what was coming had finally come. The massive energy undulations were constantly rising, and every time it rose, it would bring great pressure to Malti. The sky had already turned black. It was daytime for Ming Ming, but at this moment it seemed like night had arrived. The black energy continued to spread in the air. The 9-star alignment had already begun. Maldini knew that the greatest disaster in the history of mankind would probably arrive today. He was waiting. At this moment, as the highest leader of the Vatican, he could only face everything that was about to happen. Greece. Parthenon. Yamu slowly opened her eyes as she sat cross-legged on her seat. Compared to before, the divine aura on her body was clearly much weaker. However, her beautiful eyes now had a much more human-like luster. 3 days ago, Yamu had already returned to the human world from the divine world. Under her blessing, the power of the divine world had been completely absorbed by the 12 constellation guardians. The time for the 9-star alignment was up. Everything happened faster than expected. The black aura also enveloped the sky above Greece, and even the entire West. What was supposed to come had finally come. Yenwang Republic, Tibet, Holy Buddha Temple. The rosary beads in Zagru's hand suddenly broke, and a total of 18 Bodhi seeds made contact with the ground, producing a tinkling sound. He opened his eyes. The light in Zagru's eyes suddenly became a little more strange. He let out a deep sigh. Earth's crisis is really coming, and this is just the beginning. Chi-Yu, why can't I sense your aura? Where are you? It looked like everything that happened next. It's no longer something I can predict. On this day, the government agencies in charge of astronomical phenomena on Earth all saw a strange astronomical phenomenon. The 9 planets on Earth suddenly sped up. The 9 planets lined up with the Sun in an instant. Moreover, the speed of their revolution changed. With the Sun as the center, the 9 planets maintained the same rotation speed and began to revolve around the Sun in a straight line. This was the first time in thousands of years that something like this had happened. 9 stars aligned. The first consequence was that the Earth lost its sunlight. Everything became dark, silent, and gloomy. No matter how bright the light was, it couldn't brighten the darkness. An invisible shadow appeared in everyone's heart. The conquest of the various countries on Earth had begun to get chaotic. Every country wanted to figure out what was going on. However, even the most powerful nation, the United States, was unable to ascertain why this phenomenon had occurred. Hell. Satan stood at the edge of the myriad demons' gorge. The light in his eyes had already become incomparably intense. He had waited for so many years for this day to finally arrive. The energy in the myriad demons' gorge was becoming more and more unstable. He knew that the barrier that had troubled and obstructed the armies of hell for tens of thousands of years was finally about to open. Behind Satan, the fallen angel Lucifer and the princess of hell, Salinger, stood on his left and right respectively. Behind them were 1,000 generals of the Hell Army. The majority of them were from the Black Generals. They all had at least 2 wings. Behind these generals, a total of 3 million soldiers from the Burning Legion were ready to set off. In their eyes shone with a bloodthirsty and fiery light. The last time Chi-Yu had come to Hell alone, it had greatly shocked Satan. Although it couldn't erase his ambition to go to Earth, it had given him a strong warning. After all, Chi-Yu was only one person. However, the destruction he brought to Hell was simply too great. Not only did a large number of experts from the Burning Legion and the 4-winged experts from the Black Generals perish. Even a large number of hellish creatures in the core circle of Hell were destroyed. In the end, he even defeated Satan and Lucifer with the bull demon king he summoned. That kind of power already gave Satan a sense of fear. Thus, after Chi-Yu left, although Satan's heart was filled with rage, the wise monarch of Hell immediately began his plans. On one hand, he united the underworld. On the other hand, he carried out a new round of recruitment in the entire Hell. The Burning Legion, which originally only had 100,000 people, expanded to 3 million. Almost all the powerful people in Hell were integrated. This time, the appearance of the 9 stars alignment could be considered as Satan staking everything in one throw. He had no way out. Either he successfully occupied Earth and destroyed everything that stood in his way, or hell would decline. Lingaire's feelings were extremely complicated. After Qiyu left, her reputation in hell dropped greatly. At the same time, she was severely punished by Satan. However, she was Satan's only heir and his only relative. Just like what Lucifer had said, Satan wouldn't do anything to her. After the recruitment of the Burning Legion was completed, Lingaire was released. She didn't want to go to Earth now because she didn't know how she should face Qiyu when she arrived on Earth. Suddenly, a huge amount of energy started to fluctuate violently in the sky above the Valley of Demons. Layers of bluish-purple lightning shot into the sky in a ring-shaped manner. The lightning attribute energy particles that were filled with righteousness were wreaking havoc. Even Satan, who was standing at the front, had no choice but to open his Demon King's domain to barely withstand it. It's starting. Everyone, get ready. Satan's eyes were filled with a fiery light. It's coming. It's coming. Just as he expected, the huge amount of lightning attribute energy dissipated at an unprecedented speed. In the blink of an eye, the sky had already turned bluish-purple. As the airflow fluctuated, the light in the sky began to distort. The bluish-purple light became less and less, and a pitch-black cave was revealed in the sky. The area of the cave continued to expand as the bluish-purple light disappeared. The restriction that had blocked the army of hell for countless years had finally disappeared. Satan couldn't help but laugh when he saw the opening passage in the sky. Earth. Humans on Earth. Darkness will envelop the world. Everything will become the territory of hell under my feet. At this time, countless roars suddenly rang out in the Valley of Demons. Then, a huge amount of energy soared into the sky. Thousands of figures were climbing up the Valley of Demons at an extremely fast speed. Satan did not panic because of their sudden appearance. The corner of the mouth revealed a smile. The corner of his mouth revealed a trace of disdain as he slowly raised his right hand. The thousands of generals standing behind Lingaire and Lucifer stepped forward at the same time. Energy instantly condensed, and a huge amount of darkness aura rose crazily. A black mist floated up. It formed a huge pressure. That's right, the restriction above had been activated. The ferocious demons that had been trapped in the Valley of Demons for many years were naturally the first to react. Although they had been in chaos for a long time because of Satan's departure, they had been trapped for so long. How could they restrain themselves when they suddenly discovered that the restriction above them had disappeared? However, when these thousands of figures climbed out of the Valley of Demons, they immediately discovered that they were already surrounded. The 3 million soldiers of the Burning Legion were all glowing with green flames. The huge military force stretched as far as the eye could see. Especially the Demon King standing at the forefront, whose entire body was emitting an ice-cold aura, completely dashed the excitement and hope that had just risen in their hearts. Silence. After the 3,000 hell creatures climbed up the narrow valley, they fell into complete silence. They fell into complete silence, and the light of despair filled the eyes of every hell creature. If it was only the Burning Legion, they might have the courage to fight. After all, those who could be locked up by Satan were once powerhouses of hell. However, Satan was here, and so was the fallen angel Lucifer. In hell, the powerhouses were absolutely powerful. Even if Satan was alone, they still didn't have much hope of escaping. A 12-winged demon against a 6-winged hell creature at most. It would be a one-sided massacre. Satan coldly looked at the hell creatures that he had locked up for millions of years. His entire body emitted a monstrous aura. With the support of his subordinates behind him, the huge pressure made it difficult for the hell creatures to even breathe. Life or death, I'll give you a chance to choose. Choose death. I can immediately destroy your body and soul, and you'll disappear from this world forever. You've been locked up in the Valley of Demons for at least 1,000 years. I can let bygones be bygones for the mistakes you made back then. However, from now on, you must swear allegiance to me. As you can see, the entrance to earth has already opened. Now is the time for hell to descend upon the human world. Your only chance is to obey all my orders and become the vanguard of hell's army. Now I'll give you 10 breaths of time to choose. After 10 breaths of time, you'll be destroyed. The 12 wings on his back were fully unfurled, emitting the tyrannical aura of a devil king. The enormous energy fluctuations clearly showed that he was the strongest expert in the infernal realm. At this moment, in this place, in the infernal realm, he was the absolute devil god. There were no fools among the hell creatures. At the very least, none of the 3,000 who had just escaped from the valley of demons in front of Satan were fools. Sensing Satan's aura, although they were filled with hatred for this great demon king, none of them dared to resist because none of them wanted to commit suicide. If they weren't afraid of death, how could they have chosen not to commit suicide after being locked up for so many years? They had endured the torture of loneliness and persevered until now, all for the sake of survival. Now that Satan had given them a chance, they naturally knew what they should choose. The first expert from the Black General tribe knelt down. Immediately after, more and more hell creatures gradually knelt down, prostrating themselves in worship of the demon god in front of them. The 3,000 hell creatures, all of whom had been trapped for at least 1,000 years, knelt before Satan, awaiting his orders. For the sake of survival, they could only choose to submit. This was the only ending. A hint of gratification appeared in Satan's eyes. Good. You're worthy of being the experts of hell. Now you'll form your own system, led by Lucifer. Children of hell, I, Satan, will lead you to earth, the place we've dreamed of for countless years. Let darkness descend upon the human world. Let the aura of hell fill every corner of that world. Let's go. Satan was the first to fly. His 12 wings expanded in the air. Under his leadership, the army of hell streamed out and headed toward the passage to hell in the air. Under the influence of Satan's powerful magic, all the hell creatures were given the ability to fly. The black hole in the air continuously devoured their bodies, and they disappeared one by one. At this moment, the darkness on earth was getting thicker and thicker. Pope Marty's expression turned ugly, because he felt an immense pressure. He knew that there was no longer any chance of luck for the Vatican. The army of hell had already arrived. Leading the experts of the Vatican, he was now on his way to Germany. This was because he knew that hell had made a lot of preparations to come to earth, and the covenant of darkness was clearly the base that hell had established on earth. They would definitely appear there first, and then begin their invasion of the entire earth. The governments of various countries had already received the Pope's warrant. Some small countries did not care about this at all, but the big countries that had participated in the asteroid battle knew that the Pope was definitely not being an alarmist. Back then, Chi Yu had used the Xianyuan sword to change the direction of the asteroid single-handedly, which had already shocked them too much. Therefore, all the big countries got busy, and a large number of troops began to be mobilized. In particular, Germany's own army, which was equipped with advanced weapons other than nuclear bombs, had already begun to gather in Berlin. The war between humans and hell was about to begin. The Pope's judgment was right. When Satan led the army of hell to earth, their first stop was the Covenant of Darkness's Hell City. The area of Hell City was originally not enough to accommodate the Burning Legion's army. However, with Satan, the Lord of Hell, under the influence of his huge magic, the entire Hell City was instantly expanded by 10 times. The Burning Legion's army had already been stationed there. Before Satan came to Earth, he had not formulated any invasion plans at all. In his opinion, the ordinary humans on Earth could not pose any threat at all. The only ones who could pose a threat were human powerhouses like Chi Yu. As long as they could completely destroy the human powerhouses, Earth would belong to Hell. Lucifer, Hades, and the rest have arrived? Satan asked in a deep voice as he sat on the main seat of the Covenant of Darkness's conference hall. Lucifer nodded and said, I have already contacted Hades, the Lord of the Underworld. He has already led his army to Earth. However, the place where they open the passage is within the borders of America. I believe that the Lord of the Underworld has already begun to make his move. America? That seems to be the largest country on Earth. Satan's gaze shifted to the chairman of the Darkness faction. This was the first time that the chairman of the Darkness faction had seen the Demon King in person. When he heard Satan's question, he hurriedly stepped forward and replied in fear and trepidation, "Yes, Your Majesty. America is the strongest country of the human race. It is a superpower. Although they do not have many powerhouses, the technological prowess of America cannot be underestimated. Fortunately, they used almost all of their nuclear bombs when the asteroid hit Earth. Now, their overall combat power has been greatly reduced. With the underworld gnawing on this tough bone, I'm afraid that they might not be able to successfully occupy this country. You should know that America's mechas and various advanced weapons are still very powerful." Satan snorted disdainfully. "I don't care what Hades does. We will use this place as a base and immediately begin to sweep through the various Western countries on Earth. We must completely destroy all forces that can resist us in a short period of time. Pass down my order. The Burning Legion is to set off. The targets of destruction are the armies of the various countries on Earth and all forces that dare to resist us. Do not lay your hands on ordinary human civilians. Those ordinary humans will become our slaves in the future." Satan had never thought of completely destroying the human race. That was not his goal. There were many things about the human race that he liked very much, such as movies. What he wanted was to rule the entire human race and make all humans his slaves. "Yes, Your Majesty." All the generals of Hell who were able to participate in this pre-war meeting bowed in unison. At this time, Hell City suddenly shook violently. Bursts of rumbling sounds came from all directions. The chairman of the Darkness faction's expression changed greatly. He cried out involuntarily, "Not good. We have encountered a large number of attacks. It seems that the humans are not prepared to sit and wait for death." Satan said indifferently, "So what? The original plan remains the same. They came just in time. It saves me the trouble of looking for these ordinary humans. Let's begin. Hell has descended." That's right. At this time, Hell City, where the Dark Parliament was located, had been surrounded by the armies of various human countries. Among them were Germany, the United States, France, Britain, and several other major countries. Although the various governments did not fully believe the Pope's words, they still sent a lot of well-equipped troops. A total of 4 armies appeared on the outskirts of Berlin. The Pope led his subordinates and was currently together with the generals of the Allied army. Although Hell City was hidden, the Pope naturally had a way to find it after fighting against the Dark Parliament for so many years. Under the guidance of the experts of the Holy See, the missiles and tanks of various countries were launched at the same time and began to bombard the territory of Hell City. That was why there was a reaction from within Hell City. General Roche, as the marshal of this allied army, looked at the Pope with some doubt. He said, "Your Majesty, our allied army has already launched hundreds of surface-to-surface missiles. Why is there no reaction at all?" He was obviously doubting the Pope's order. Marty said with a sullen face, "Don't worry. I have already felt their presence. Very powerful. He was much, much stronger than before. Mr. General, order your troops to prepare for battle. What we are going to face is not an ordinary army, but a powerhouse from hell. In order to defend Earth, you must believe me. Only I have the confidence to defeat them. I wonder how many silver bullets you have prepared this time?" Roche frowned and said, "Your Majesty, are we going to launch missiles? As for the silver bullets you mentioned, we have not prepared them. I don't believe there is any difference between silver and steel. That will only become a waste of resources for the various countries." Marty's expression suddenly changed. He said hoarsely, "What? You have not prepared silver weapons? If you do not have silver weapons, I'm afraid you will not even have the ability to fight against the army of hell." Roche snorted. He was not a believer of the Holy See, nor had he participated in the battle on the asteroid. He really did not understand why the European Union would listen to the Pope and gather a large number of troops here. "Your Majesty, although I do not reject your faith, please do not be alarmist. I have always been an atheist." Just as Marty was about to say something, his expression suddenly changed. He said dejectedly, "Facts speak louder than words. General Roche, you will pay an irreversible price for your decision. They are here." "That's right, they are here." Hell City appeared out of thin air on the outskirts of Berlin without any warning. It was a completely black city. Under the illumination of the Allied Army's lights, the entire Hell City floated about 100 meters above the ground. That enormous dark aura and the purple sun of Hell City emitted an unprecedentedly powerful energy wave. A layer of black fog surged out. Under the dumbfounded gazes of the Allied forces of the 4 countries, countless black figures floated down. Hell's invasion war had truly begun from this moment. Quickly launch the missiles and destroy that city." Without Roche's orders, almost all the armies of the various countries reacted the moment they discovered the appearance of Hell City. After all, they were the elite armies of the various countries. Countless missiles bombarded the direction of Hell City in an even more concentrated manner than before, bringing with it a series of ear-piercing whistles. Satan stood on the walls of Hell City and looked coldly at the concentrated missiles. His eyes shone brightly, and a circle of dark red light was instantly released with his body as the center. The huge dark red energy, supported by the 12 wings flapping on his back, enveloped the entire Hell City in the blink of an eye. Countless explosions occurred at the same time, shaking the entire Berlin. The ensuing explosions brought with them a huge shockwave, causing a large number of the armies at the forefront to be blown away by the shockwave. The deafening roar deafened the ears of at least thousands of soldiers. The dark red light disappeared, and the underworld city remained unscathed. Satan was still standing on the city walls. He had a look of surprise on his face. The weapons of the humans can actually reach such a level. I actually needed to use 30% of my strength to defend against it. It seems that it was not a mistake for me to enlist the 3 million Burning Legion here. The real battle had just begun. No, the scene before his eyes could no longer be described as a battle. It was a completely one-sided massacre. Was the tank sturdy? To humans, it was a terrifying weapon. However, to the hell beasts, tanks were nothing. The armor was no different from paper. The powerful hell creatures relied on their sturdy bodies to fight the human army head-on. The first to be destroyed were the defenseless ground troop. The bullets in their hands could only leave white marks on the hell creatures. Even armor-piercing bullets couldn't deal much damage to the hell army. As for the Burning Legion's hellish creatures, but in their eyes, he had become the god of death. Wherever the green flames went, they not only burned the flesh, but also the souls of the human soldiers. In front of the green flames, steel instantly turned into molten iron. The Burning Legion had already mobilized 50,000 people. These creatures of hell were under the command of the Hell Commander. Almost as soon as Satan blocked the missile attack, the Burning Legion began to retreat. They immediately charged into the human camp. General Ross stared at the holographic screen in front of him, dumbfounded. His face had already become extremely ugly. Cold sweat flowed down his forehead, but he didn't feel anything. His body was trembling. The ones that appeared on the screen. They were creatures he had never seen before. He watched as one army after another was destroyed by these monsters filled with dark aura. Hell City was like a huge rock, pressing heavily on his heart. He knew he was wrong. He was really wrong. Your Highness, When he turned around to look for Marty, he found that Marty and his men had disappeared. Ross slumped into the chair, his body trembling. He didn't know what to do. Report. Marshall, England's 1st Armored Division and 1st Tank Division have been completely wiped out. At least 80% of the 4 countries' armies have been destroyed by unknown enemies. Request for reinforcements. Roche slammed the table in front of him. That was fast. In just 10 minutes, tens of thousands of people had been injured. What about the missile troops? There are also heavy firepower troops. Fire at full force and blow them up. At the same time, immediately notify the various countries' armies and request for reinforcements. On Roche's side, he was hurriedly issuing orders one after another. The generals of the four-nation coalition army were busy, but at this time, they had no fighting spirit because they were not facing humans. They were terrifying creatures that came from nowhere. They had unimaginable attack and defense capabilities. Normal weapons were useless against them. The missiles and heavy firepower roared once again. Ross was able to become the Marshal of the Allied forces because he had a certain level of ability. This time, he chose to completely abandon the ground forces and launched a destructive attack on the Hell Legion with carpet bombing. Even if it was Satan, in the face of this kind of suicidal attack that disregarded his allies, it was impossible for him to completely protect his subordinates with his ability. No matter how strong the Burning Legion was, their bodies had a limit. After a round of powerful bombardment, the Burning Legion's momentum was finally stopped. There were also some casualties. Of course, compared to humans, this number of casualties was almost negligible. The 4 countries' allied forces, 4 high-tech armies, had a total of 100,000 people. The only ones that could still fight were the missile troops and heavy firepower troops at the rear. At least 50,000 people had been destroyed by the Burning Legion's attack. There were countless injured and disabled people. A large number of weapons were destroyed. As for the Hell Legion, they were only temporarily stopped. Marty had already led the Vatican's powerhouses to the front line. Every member of the Vatican's face was pale because they saw a scene of flesh and blood flying everywhere. The bombardment of missiles had destroyed the enemy and the remaining 4 countries' armies. At this moment, what appeared before them was a completely scorched land. The Burning Legion had temporarily retreated to Hell City. However, the missiles couldn't cause any damage to Hell City. There was no longer a need for Satan to defend. The powerhouses under him released their energy and completely blocked the human Allied forces' missiles outside Hell City. Marty's face revealed a trace of sadness. Hell is finally here, and it came so quickly. We haven't even completed the final preparations, and they're already here. Vatican, listen to my orders and prepare for battle. The number of people in the Vatican was insignificant compared to the Allied forces of the 4 countries. With Marty as the leader, the Vatican's holy knights, knights of light, clergymen from the Court of Judgment, and bishops from all the major churches in the world added up to only about 3,000 people. However, this was already the Vatican's full strength. A deep chant with a desolate aura rang out, and a layer of faint milky white light appeared on every member of the Vatican's clergy. The holy aura dispersed the darkness in front of them, and as they continued to rise, the energy waves of the Vatican were revealed. At this moment, the governments that received the report from the Allied forces were panicking. However, even if they sent their fastest troops, they wouldn't be able to reach Berlin in a short time. The battle had already begun once again. Satan waved his hand, and Lucifer was the first to fly out. This time, the Burning Legion had only sent 3,000 people. However, these 3,000 people were from the 10,000 Demons Valley. However, they were no longer facing the Allied forces of the 4 countries. Instead, they were facing Pope Marty and his clergymen of the Vatican. The milky white light collided with the dark aura. The battle between the powerhouses had finally begun. In the United States, the gray air current was like a plague. In just one day, it had attacked the entire state of Kansas. At least millions of civilians were completely destroyed by the gray air current. The entire state of Kansas was completely shrouded in a gray sea. Chapter 3:22. In order to salvage the situation, the strongest mecha warriors of the United States had finally joined the battle. However, could they stop the sweeping gray energy? Hades was sitting on the chair that had originally belonged to the governor of Kansas. He wasn't in a hurry to expand his territory. Instead, he was consolidating his power in Kansas. Hades looked even more handsome than Satan. His entire body exuded a feminine aura, and his fair skin looked even more delicate than a woman's. He was about 2 meters tall, and his entire body was covered in a layer of grayish-black armor. His long, pale hair was draped over his back. At the moment, his subordinates and the governor of Kansas were standing in front of his desk. So this is the structure of the world on Earth. Does that mean that we have arrived at the largest country on Earth this time? Hades' voice was just like his appearance. It was filled with a feminine aura. His face was even more beautiful than a woman's, and there was a faint smile on it. The governor of Kansas was trembling nonstop. If an ordinary person saw Hades for the first time, they would definitely think that he was a superstar. Other than being a little feminine, his appearance could almost be described as perfect. However, the governor knew that the person sitting in front of him was definitely a demon. A true demon. It had only been a short day. Before this person had come here, he had already obtained a lot of information. More than 4 million civilians had been killed in Kansas. However, there were less than 100 people who had killed them. However, every single one of these people possessed extremely powerful strength that humans simply couldn't resist. The structure of the underworld was completely different from that of hell. On the contrary, there were many similarities with the divine realm. After all, the underworld king Hades was from the divine realm. There were only 81 netherworld generals under him. However, although there were only 81 of them, they possessed extremely terrifying combat abilities. It was easier to control, and it was also more flexible. This was why the underworld king of the underworld, Hades, was able to contend against hell. Hades smiled and said gently, "Governor, yes, you're the governor, right? From now on, you can be my advisor. After I unify the human world, I might even give you a high position." No, I've told you everything you want to know. Please let me go. The governor's body was trembling, but his heart was filled with fear. But he still had some dignity. If he really submitted to Hades, then he would probably become the target of the entire human race. Even if he died, he didn't want such a situation to happen. Hades snorted and said, "Is that still up to you?" With a wave of his right hand, a gray light floated over and devoured the Kansas governor's body amidst a shrill scream. The gray energy was clearly filled with corrosive effects. Soon, the Kansas governor's entire body had turned completely gray, and his hair had also turned the same color as Hades. There was not a single trace of life left in his body. His eyes became dull and lifeless, losing all color of life. "All right. You may leave. From now on, you are my servant." Hades frowned and looked at the governor of Kansas. "Yes, my respected master." The Kansas governor had completely lost his original memory and consciousness. After bowing respectfully to Hades, he immediately retreated. Hades looked at his retreating figure and snorted disdainfully. "Life force is too weak. It can't even be considered a tonic. I really don't understand why the humans on Earth are so weak, yet they can rule this core world. If not for the underworld's barrier, I'm afraid I would have completely devoured this place long ago." Millsap. "Yes, Your Highness. Please give me your instructions." A netherworld general shrouded in gray fog appeared silently in front of Hades. Hades said coldly, "Go, order everyone to temporarily stop expanding. With Kansas as the boundary, turn all the humans here into netherworld servants. After consolidating, continue expanding." "Yes, Your Majesty." The gray figure disappeared like smoke. A bloodthirsty light suddenly appeared in Hades' eyes, and he licked his lips in a somewhat intoxicated manner. "Earth is indeed a very good place. Darkness has descended on the human world. Haha, Satan, when the time comes, it will be up to you and me to fight. Yes, darkness had already enveloped the western part of the earth. At the same time, the 9-star alignment appeared. As time passed, it was no longer possible for the governments of the various countries to conceal all of this. Immediately, the entire Western world fell into a state of panic. Western countries dispatched a large number of troops to contend against these unknown enemies. However, the result was that most of them were wiped out. The power of Satan and Hades began to spread rapidly in the West like a plague. At the same time, the shackles around his body disappeared. Chi Yu only felt his body lighten, and he had already returned to the human world. However, before he landed in the Dragon Field courtyard, he already clearly felt a huge pressure coming from the air. Darkness, complete darkness. Although the lights of the Dragon Field courtyard looked very dazzling in the darkness, that feeling of oppression was clearly transmitted to every part of Chi Yu's body. That incomparably huge aura was completely described by the celestial bodies. With the appearance of the 9-star alignment, the entire human world had completely fallen into darkness. There were no changes in the Dragon Field courtyard. It was still as quiet as ever. The first thing Chi Yu did was to find Uncle Zhou. Chi Yu, you're finally back. Do you know what exactly is going on? Since yesterday there has been a huge upheaval all over the world. Moreover, the darkness seems to have extended infinitely, and the sun still hasn't appeared. Uncle Zhou said to Chi Yu anxiously. Frowning, Chi Yu said in a deep voice, Uncle Zhou, don't be anxious. What exactly happened on Earth? Please tell me in detail. Uncle Zhou nodded and said, according to our country's news, a large number of unknown creatures have suddenly appeared in the Western countries, including the United States. They have attacked the Western countries. Without any warning, millions of people have died in the United States and Germany, which bore the brunt of the attack. No one knows how these dark creatures came about. Although the situation has been somewhat under control, the losses of the various countries are still increasing. It's coming. It's really coming. Chi Yu muttered to himself. At the same time, 2 rays of light filled with battle intent instantly shot out from his eyes. Since it had already come, it was time for him to make a move. Uncle Zhou, have there been any unknown creatures in Yanhuang and the East? Chi Yu was still a little worried about his initial judgment. Since evil creatures had appeared in the West, would there be any in the East as well? If that was the case, even if he wanted to help the Western countries, he wouldn't be able to do it. Uncle Zhou shook his head and said, it's fine. This situation did not appear in our country. Because of the changes in the West, our country has already begun to mobilize the military forces of the major military regions. If nothing happened here, the government is preparing to send troops to the West to help them deal with those unknown creatures. Chi Yu, do you think this is an alien attack on Earth? Chi Yu shook his head and said, no. Uncle Zhou, don't ask. I'll leave the Dragon Field courtyard to you. I want to understand the situation immediately. If anything happens here, you can call me on my cell phone. After saying this, Chi Yu once again rose into the air. After returning from the heaven realm, he didn't even have time to rest and went straight to the capital city. The information that Uncle Zhou knew was limited. If he wanted to know more, then looking for the Yanhuang soul was definitely the right choice. As Chi Yu flew in the air, he dialed Ji Zhongming's number. Chi Yu, is that you? Where are you? I can't find you no matter how I look for you. When I call your phone, you always tell me that you're not in the service area. What's wrong with you? Didn't you already change to a satellite phone? Ji Zhongming's voice was full of urgency. Chi Yu laughed bitterly in his heart. Even if it was a satellite phone, there was no signal in the heaven realm. Uncle, I'm sorry, I just came back from a long journey. I already know what happened, and I'm on the way to the Yanhuang Soul Land. Oh, you're there too, right? That's great. Let's talk when we meet. I'll be there soon. After hanging up, Chi Yu's body suddenly accelerated. With his current flying speed, he arrived at the Yen Huang Soul Headquarters main building in a few breaths. When Chi Yu walked into the main building, he met Jida, who had come out to meet him. Jida didn't even have much time to communicate with him, and immediately pulled Chi Yu into the secret passage to the Yen Huang Soul Headquarters. The Yen Huang Soul Headquarters was abnormally busy. In the past, when Chi Yu came here, most of the Yen Huang Soul members were lazy, either resting or chatting. But today was completely different. Everyone's faces were filled with nervousness, and the entire Yen Huang Soul was already operating at high speed. Chi Yu. General Ji Zhongming saw Chi Yu and immediately walked over. At this moment, he was discussing something with a few Yen Huang Soul powerhouses. "Uncle, I'm here. I need to know the details now. Can you tell me everything you know?" General Ji Zhongming nodded and waved to the others, letting them go about their own work. He brought Chi Yu inside alone, and came to the innermost big screen. "Chi Yu, look. This is the latest news we've sent back. They're all from the Western countries. They've already officially requested help from our country and the Russian government." As he spoke, the big screen had already lit up. The first thing Chi Yu saw was Hell City floating in the darkness. Moreover, he saw the scene of the missiles bombarding Hell City being blocked by Satan's domain. "Satan, you've finally come. Uncle, where is this place?" "Germany. This is Germany." The unknown creatures that appeared in the West mainly appeared in two places. One was Germany and the other was America. Right now, Germany and America have entered a state of national alert. The troops of the European Union countries are gathering in Germany, and the troops of America and Canada are also gathering in America. The image changed. This time, it was the American state of Kansas, which was filled with a gray aura. The image showed a large number of humans gathered on the street. Every single one of them had a layer of gray aura around them, and their eyes were dull and lifeless. Although there were many of them, they were very quiet, and they were all slowly moving in one direction. Above these people, there were a few unknown creatures shrouded in gray fog floating. It seemed to be driving these people forward. The situation on both sides is different. The situation on the German side is relatively better. At least the number of civilian casualties is not too high. However, the number of enemies is relatively higher. Their attack power is too strong. The damage that modern weapons can do to them is very limited. On the other hand, the situation in America is not optimistic. First of all, there are tens of millions of people in Kansas. However, apart from those who are dead, the rest seem to have been enslaved by the enemy. As you can see, these Americans seem to have lost their minds. The army can't fire at them. The United States, the world's largest country, is now in an unprecedented crisis. Seeing these two scenes did not surprise Chi Yu too much. Just as he had guessed, Hell and the Underworld had descended at the same time, appearing in Germany and the United States respectively. He had a better understanding of the situation in Hell, but now it seemed that the Underworld was even more terrifying than Hell. What kind of opponent would the Underworld King Hades be? "Uncle, has the Roman Catholic Church made a move?" Chi Yu asked. Ji Changming said, "The Roman Catholic Church's ability users have already participated in the war on the German side. With them as the core, together with the troops of various countries, they are barely able to suppress the enemy. However, they are still losing ground. Now, the European Union countries can be said to be using their lives to stop the enemy's advance. Basically, all the weapons that can be used have been put to use. However, the lethality of modern weapons against the enemy is too low. Only the holy energy of the ability users of the Roman Catholic Church can have a better effect. It is said that the various governments have started to manufacture silver weapons according to the Pope's proposal, hoping that they can be of some use." Silver weapons? Chi Yu was a little puzzled. He did not know if silver weapons could cause any damage to hell creatures, but now it seemed that Satan's army had not been fully deployed yet. It seemed that they were just testing the waters. It seemed that the Roman Catholic Church was in big trouble this time. However, since the Roman Catholic Church had already made a move, what about the Greek side? Uncle, did the Greek guardians participate in the war? Ji Changming shook his head and said, I don't know about that. This is all the information we got. It has only been a little more than a day, and the whole West is in chaos. No one can care too much. Chi Yu, do you know where these unknown creatures came from? Will they also appear in our country? Chi Yu could be said to be the most authoritative and powerful of the Eastern ability users. When he led the Zodiac army to solve the problem of the asteroids, the world's governments had already spread the saying that the strong of the East were invincible. At this time, in the face of these unknown creatures, Ji Changming naturally wanted to understand the situation from Chi Yu. If even Chi Yu did not know, then it was even more impossible for others to know. Chi Yu said, Uncle, I basically understand the situation this time. It is impossible for these two enemies to appear in the East, at least not before they completely occupy the West. However, Uncle, we can't be careless. It is the Burning Hell Legion that appeared in Germany. I don't know if you have heard of the Western legends. The Roman Catholic Church exists. At the same time, there is the Dark Parliament. The Roman Catholic Church believes in heaven, and the Dark Parliament believes in hell. This time, the solar system has a miracle of 9 stars aligned, which has not been seen in 10,000 years, causing hell to come to the human world. What did you say? Hell? Does hell really exist? Ji Changming looked at Chi Yu, dumbfounded. Chi Yu let out a bitter laugh. That's right. Actually, there are many things that only exist in legends, not only in the West but also in the East. So now the whole world is in a panic. Simply put, in our solar system there are actually many different planes, and some of these planes are righteous. Some are evil. However, these planes can't easily come to Earth. Earth is the center of all the planes in the entire solar system. However, these planes are also connected to Earth, but they are blocked by a huge seal. This time, the appearance of the 9 stars aligned caused the passage between the evil plane and Earth to open, causing hell and the underworld that appeared in America to come to the human world. They are the two most powerful in the evil plane. Their goal is to rule the whole of Earth and maintain darkness within the boundaries of Earth forever. As long as they can fill Earth with the aura of darkness, being shrouded by evil, then the 9 stars aligned situation will continue. If that happens, humanity will suffer a disaster. I'm afraid it won't be any worse than an asteroid hitting Earth. Hell? The underworld? General Ji Changming's expression had already become very ugly. Chi Yu, what should we do now? Should we go and support the Western countries? If the West is finished, we will also be greatly threatened. Why don't we go and help them now? Chi Yu slowly nodded his head. You're right. That's what I thought as well. However, I still have a doubt in my heart. That is the appearance of the evil plane in the West. But what about the East? Will there also be evil forces in the East and cause huge losses to our country? Hearing what Chi Yu said, Ji Changming's expression suddenly changed. This was what he absolutely did not want to see, and it was also the problem that the Yanhuang government was most worried about. Then what should we do? If our troops are dispatched, they will be attacked by unknown creatures. If that happened, the losses to our country would be too great. You have to know, we are the most populous country in the world. Whether it's Germany or the United States, as long as it happens in our country, the damage to the people will be many times greater. For a moment, Ji Changming also fell into a state of panic. Ever since he became a general, this was the first time he felt so flustered. If it wasn't for Chi Yu, who was like a pillar in the sky, he was afraid that he would have immediately reported to the Yanhuang Military Commission. Chi Yu was very calm, and his handsome face was as calm as an ancient well. His eyes flashed as he said, Uncle, you don't have to worry. Do you trust me? Ji Changming immediately nodded and said, Of course I trust you. Maybe you don't know it, but you are now our country's biggest secret weapon. You have become our country's biggest deterrent to other Western countries. Say it, your opinion will definitely be valued by the central government. Chi Yu's heart warmed. The country's affirmation and attention made him know that everything he had done in the past was not in vain. His eyes flashed coldly as he said calmly, "Then that's it for now. Continue to gather the forces of the major military regions, ready to deal with any possible changes. However, stop the aid to the Western countries." Are we really not going to help them? But this is not in line with the style of the Yenhuang Republic. Chi Yu, you have to understand that our country has always been. Chi Yu smiled and nodded. Of course I understand what kind of country Yenhuang is. Don't worry. I did not make this decision because I am afraid that our soldiers and national strength will be damaged. The reason why I said this is because even if our troops reach the West, the help they can provide will be very limited. Moreover, it is very likely that there will be huge casualties. If that is the case, why send them to their deaths? Let me be honest with you. To deal with the demons of hell and the underworld that have appeared in the West, what is needed is not technology or human wave tactics, but experts. True experts. The army is not needed. Among the soldiers of Yenhuang, only the members of the Yenhuang soul sect can go against them. Moreover, they will not be of much use. If that is the case, why not let all the military forces of our country be prepared, and prepare for the changes that may occur in our country at any time? At the same time, I will tell you the four of them later. Luofa, contact them and tell them that I said it. Let the four great families gather their forces together. If anything happens in the East, they will have to deal with it. If something happens in the East, then they must go up at the first moment to fight against the enemy. No matter what plane of evil appears, they must hold out until I return. That's the only way we can minimize our losses when the situation changes. Chi Yu, you mean you want to go? Ji Zhongming was shocked. Looking at Chi Yu's calm face, he suddenly felt a sense of respect. Chi Yu smiled slightly. He nodded and said, "Yes, I want to go. Because I have to go. I can ignore the life and death of the Vatican and the Greek protectors. But the civilians of the West are innocent. Moreover, just like you said, if the battle does not end in the West, once it spreads to our East, the lives of Yenhuang will be lost. Humans are selfish, and so am I. So I must do my best to end this battle in the West. Please report my exact words to your superiors. I will set out at once to aid the West. There's no need to use our country's strength. I believe that with the help of our Zodiac army, the Western world will be able to deal with the Zodiac army. This is already the greatest help I can offer." Ji Zhongming nodded and said, "All right. I'll report to my superiors at your command. However, if you want to go to the West, you must be careful. After all, that is a legendary evil person." Chi Yu smiled confidently and said, "Uncle, oh no, actually I should call you father-in-law. Don't worry. I've already fought with them, and it won't be easy for them to destroy me. After this is over, I will propose to Ming Ming and the others. At that time, don't reject me as your son-in-law." Ji Zhongming unhappily glared at Chi Yu and said, "You little brat, you still have the time to think about this. Whether or not I agree will wait until you come back. If you want me to promise you, the first thing you have to do is to come back alive." "Oh right, are you bringing Ming Ming with you this time as well? As the general of Yenhuang, I should not doubt your command. However, as a father, I have to ask you to protect Ming Ming well. I want to see you both appear before me at the same time after the battle. Can you do that?" Chi Yu stood at attention and gave a not-so-standard military salute. "Yes, General. I promise to complete the mission." With that, with a smile on his face and a gratified nod from Ji Zhongming, his figure had already quietly disappeared. Looking at where Chi Yu had been standing, Ji Zhongming could not help but shake his head helplessly. But very quickly, he laughed. "This brat. Besides being a bit of a playboy, he is indeed a perfect son-in-law. Brat, you must bring Ming Ming back alive. As long as you can come back, I will agree to anything." As he muttered to himself, the smile on Ji Zhongming's face gradually faded. He reached out and grabbed the wireless communication device beside him. In a low voice, he said, "Connect me to the military commission. Be quick. I am Ji Zhongming." After leaving the building, Chi Yu suddenly felt his blood boil. Because of the darkness in the sky, the street lights were all on, and there was an endless stream of pedestrians. Although it was much less than usual, Chi Yu did not see much worry on the faces of the people of Yanhuang in the capital. In the capital, there were tall buildings in great numbers, and everywhere was full of vitality. However, under the shroud of darkness, how long could such vitality last? Chi Yu was very clear about what he was carrying on his shoulders. He looked deeply at the people walking in front of the building, and his figure disappeared again. "People of the motherland, I am going. Don't worry, I will never let the people of Hell and the underworld step into Yanhuang, and I will never let you suffer from their torment." The 9-star alignment was the descent of darkness into the world. In fact, it did not only bring about the two powerful evil planes, Hell and the underworld. Without the shroud of sunlight, Earth lost many things. Every day, the losses were astronomical. First of all the solar equipment had lost its function. Without the photosynthesis of sunlight, all the plants on Earth stopped growing and gradually developed in the direction of decline. Without the illumination of sunlight, people's bodies would gradually become weak. Sunlight was something that people rarely paid attention to in daily life, but it was the most essential thing in human life. Darkness would only bring about the aura of coldness and destruction. Only by finding sunlight again and dispelling the darkness could everything on Earth return to normal. Extreme speed. This was the ability that Chi Yu was using now. It was the latest ability given to him by the Thundercloud Force. At this time, he had entered the range of the international waters and was flying quickly towards the west. In the heavenly realm, in order to help the Emperor of Heaven, he had consumed a lot of energy. After that, he returned to the human world through the strange lake that was full of powerful pressure. His own energy had been consumed by more than 70%. If it were not for the fact that his water thundercloud force was strong enough, he was afraid that he would have been destroyed on the way back from the heavenly realm. After returning to Earth, he did not even have time to rest before he had to go into battle again. At this time, although his heart was full of fighting spirit, his body could not bear it. And the process of rushing to the west now was the best time for him to rest. For the current Chi Yu, it would take less than 3 hours to reach the west from Yanhuang. In these 3 hours, he had already activated his mind power and soul power, opening up his body and mind. His own origin energy entered a dormant state, while the 4 elements of the thundercloud force frantically absorbed the energy molecules in the air to replenish its consumption. Chi Yu's target was Hell City. Yes, Hell City. It was not because Germany was closer to Yanhuang than the United States, but because it was not the Greek guardians who were facing Hell City. No matter what Apollo had said to him, he would never forget his hatred for Yamu. When Ting, Klinsmann, and the Emperor's Heart Snow Lotus Queen. 3 lives. That was something that could not be erased. He had not forgotten that the Pope was also Chi Yu's enemy. However, when placed together with Yamu, the Pope's hatred seemed to be much lighter. A gentleman's revenge was a dish best served cold. When faced with a situation of right and wrong, although Chi Yu could temporarily hide his hatred in the depths of his heart, he was still unwilling to go to the United States to deal with the underworld. This was because he knew that as the successor of Goddess Athena, Yamu must have already taken her constellation guardians to the underworld to deal with the underworld king Hades. Chapter 323. On Earth, although there would often be some small-scale wars, even a year of war would definitely not be as great as today's losses. Pope Marty's expression was grim. He was left with less than 30% of his holy energy. Meanwhile, the losses of the armies of the various countries continued to rise. Although the losses were not as heavy as they were at the beginning of the war, even with the help of the powerhouses of the Vatican, the armies of the various countries were still losing tens of thousands of people every day, and the losses of various weapons were uncountable. However, what made the armies of the various countries and the Vatican puzzled was that the Burning Legion in Hell City did not seem to be in a hurry to destroy them. They only attacked once every hour, and the number of troops they sent out each time would not exceed 50,000. As long as the armies of the various countries at the front were repelled, the Burning Legion would retreat again. On the walls of Hell City, there was a Hell Mage of the Burning Legion every 10 meters or so. A total of more than 30,000 Hell Mages were intermittently chanting difficult incantations, causing the surroundings of Hell City to be covered in a layer of strange dark red energy. The defense of this dark red energy was not something that humans could imagine. After the Battle of the Asteroids, although the various countries had used up a lot of their nuclear bombs, it did not mean that they did not have any left. However, after the various countries gritted their teeth and ordered a few nuclear bombs to bombard Hell City, the only unlucky ones were the various countries' armies. A large amount of radiation became the natural defense of Hell City below and around it. Meanwhile, Hell City itself was protected by the dark red energy. There were no signs of damage, and it continued to launch a powerful attack every hour. Hell City had also become an incomparably solid defense. At this moment, the people around Marty were the higher-ups of the Allied forces. Due to the initial failure, the general had been removed from his position. Now, every country had sent a general of the level of a marshal here to fight against the enemies with the Pope. Your Highness, it's been hard on you. If not for your Holy Legion blocking the enemy's crazy attacks, I'm afraid our losses would have been even greater, a German general said sincerely. Marty sighed, shook his head, and said, Now, we've only temporarily blocked their attacks, but I can't say for how long. You've also seen that although the Vatican can deal a certain blow to the enemy, their numbers are far greater than ours. However, their numbers are incomparable to ours. The Church's expenditure is undoubtedly huge. I don't know how many more times I can withstand such a charge. After a short day of battle, less than 60% of the Sacred Legion still had combat strength. Although the newly recruited Sacred Legion had been baptized by his divine energy, their combat skills and energy were still relatively weak. They had already been sacrificed in the previous battle. Only after truly confronting the Burning Legion did Marty understand how terrifying Satan and his hellish world were. This was especially true for the 3,000 or so hell creatures in the lead. Wherever they went, the people would definitely be plunged into misery and suffering. If not for the fact that he and the 4 red-robed archbishops had fully activated their divine power and received a boost from the special energy from the heavenly realm before the descent of hell, they would not have been able to survive. The losses of the Allied forces would be at least 3 times that of what they had now. Then what should we do now? As you can see, modern weapons can hardly harm those evil creatures. Don't tell me we're just going to sit here and wait for death? The Pope shook his head and said, No, now is not the time to sit and wait for death. If my judgment was correct, from the start of the battle until now, none of the hell creatures had used their full strength, except for the fallen angel Lucifer. Hell's most powerful demon king, Satan, had only appeared once at the beginning. If he had ordered his Burning Legion to attack with all their might, I'm afraid the Allied forces would have long been broken through. I really don't understand what Satan is waiting for now. Perhaps he still has a certain degree of fear towards our weapons. He's afraid that after leaving that dark city, they will be attacked by nuclear bombs again. Without the protection of that city, no matter how powerful they are, they won't be able to fight against nuclear bombs. I don't think it can compete with a nuclear bomb, a French general said. Marty shook his head and said, If you think so, then you're underestimating Satan too much. As a demon king of hell, let alone one nuclear bomb, even 10 or 100 of them won't be able to harm him. Perhaps you still remember the scene when the asteroid was about to hit Earth. In a situation where thousands of nuclear bombs did not change the asteroid's orbit, an Eastern powerhouse, with the support of his companions, forcefully changed the asteroid's orbit. And Satan's strength is definitely not weaker than that powerhouse's. As long as he makes a move, no modern weapons can harm him. There's no doubt about that. So, I'm guessing that he still hasn't used his full strength, as though he's waiting for something. Among the generals, the one who looked the youngest was a general from England. He was a lieutenant general, the one with the lowest rank among those present. A trace of shock suddenly appeared on his resolute and handsome face. Could it be that he's waiting for us to gather our troops, so that he can capture all of us in one fell swoop? Hearing this, everyone quietened down, and a sense of fear appeared in every general's heart. If that was really the case, then these hell creatures were really too terrifying. They actually wanted to completely end the battle in Berlin. Once they completely defeated the armies of the various countries, then when they set foot in Europe and even the entire West, there would be no power that could stop them from advancing. Could it be that Satan had not made a move yet because he was waiting for more Allied forces to appear? Marty's expression also changed. Although he was not Satan, nor was he familiar with Satan, he understood that from the perspective of the hell creatures, this was obviously the best way to invade. However, he understood that from the perspective of the hell creatures, this was obviously the best way to invade. First, they would eliminate all of the enemy's fighting forces, then they would start a full-scale invasion. In a situation where hell had enough strength, this was obviously a very good idea. What should we do now? The German general who spoke first asked, somewhat at a loss. No one could answer his question, not even Marty. Because even if they knew that this was Satan's plan, they could not retreat now and let the burning legion wreak havoc in the West. If only he was here. Marty sighed, and that person's face appeared in his mind. Your Highness the Pope, this him you're talking about back then, was it? Marty nodded and said, that's right. That's him. If he was here, then Satan might not be that scary. Unfortunately, he's an Easterner, and he's already gone. Just as he said this, suddenly, the entire meeting hall shook violently. Then, a strong roar and countless screams sounded at the same time. Such a defense. Do you want to stop me? A cold voice sounded. The next moment, the roof of the meeting hall, which was strong enough to withstand the shockwave of a nuclear bomb, suddenly split from the center. Two giant black hands actually tore the roof apart. What the group, led by Pope Marty, saw was a pair of red eyes and 12 black wings. I didn't expect you humans to be so smart. You can actually guess my thoughts. Since that's the case, I'll leave your corpses intact. Back then, I've seen a human war movie. That beheading operation made me yearn for it. This time, does this count as me carrying out a beheading operation? Ha 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 ha. Satan's proud laughter caused everyone below to fall into panic. No one expected that the demon king of hell they were talking about would suddenly appear here. Everyone's hearts trembled violently. That enormous dark aura. The huge dark aura made it difficult for the generals of the various countries to even move. They were now cursing in their hearts. Who was the one who brought a movie with a beheading operation to Satan? Satan, you'll pay for everything you've done today, Marty shouted in a deep voice. At this moment, only he could still maintain a bit of calmness. Holy light seeped out of his body, contending against Satan from afar. However, he had already weakened a lot of his holy energy and was unable to face the huge pressure brought by Satan. His expression was becoming more and more unsightly. Marty knew. His holy army, which was guarding outside, was finished. The 4 red-robed archbishops and the chief inquisitor were at the front lines, ready to receive the enemy's attack at any time. Now, he could only rely on his own strength. Satan looked at Marty, his eyes filled with disdain. If the Emperor of Heaven was here, perhaps I would have some misgivings. You? You're just a dog released by the celestial emperor in the mortal world. With that bit of godly power of yours, I can't believe you. With that bit of divine power of yours, it's far from enough. Now you can all die." The entire room in the conference hall was instantly destroyed. In front of Satan, the generals were like eggs that could break at any time. There was no possibility of concealing themselves. Everyone's gaze froze. Facing Satan's towering body that was more than 10 meters tall, they knew that death was coming. Marty raised the scepter in his hand, the holy aura on his body becoming more and more intense. He knew that he had to use that move before he died. Even if he died, he would at least cause some trouble for Satan. Unfortunately, he had yet to fully comprehend the ability of that move, and his own energy was far from his peak state. Just as Satan raised his hand and was about to wave it, his expression suddenly became extremely unsightly. His entire body froze, and his gaze was no longer focused on the Pope. A long howl, like the sound of nature, pierced through the sky. The strong howl shook the entire military camp. A green light illuminated half the sky. Like a meteor chasing after the moon, the light descended upon Berlin in an instant. "Bastard, it's you again." Satan fiercely turned around, and the 12 wings on his back flapped at the same time. In almost an instant, he had already flown into the air. Dark red flames instantly ignited, dyeing his powerful 12 wings, making him look even more berserk. The green light and the dark red light formed a sharp contrast in midair. In just an instant, the two lights had already overlapped in midair. Boom! A huge energy fluctuation erupted in midair thousands of meters high. The location of the explosion was the center of the confrontation between the human allied forces and Hell City. An indescribable huge green and red shockwave appeared in an instant. Almost instantly, a huge pit appeared on the ground thousands of meters below the center of the explosion. Everything that was originally there was completely vaporized. Even Hell City in the distance trembled slightly. At the front line of the European Union's allied forces, a large number of mechanized troops were sent flying in all directions. If it were not for the fact that there were not many troops stationed there, the losses would have been even greater. The green and red light lasted in midair for a full 10 seconds before slowly fading away. Satan was still floating there, but the wings on his back had expanded twice as much as before. His face was full of anger as he stared 100 meters in front of him. 100 meters in front of him, a human in black armor floated silently. There was only a pair of black wings on his back. In the dark night, if it wasn't for the green light enveloping his body and his long silver hair, it would have been easy to miss him. However, he had now become the focus of the European Union's allied forces. The Pope dispersed the energy he had gathered in a panic. Looking at the green figure in the air, his voice suddenly became a little choked. "He's here. He's finally here at the most critical moment." Since the beginning of the battle, the Vatican had become the absolute main force. Although the Pope had commanded the Vatican for many years, as a human with a high status and power, this was his first time on the battlefield. After gritting his teeth and persisting for so long, that person had finally arrived. At this moment, his whole body produced a feeling of collapse. His complexion had also become much better. With a smile on his face, Chi Yu looked at Satan in front of him and said, "Your Majesty the Demon King, we meet again. How is Lung Er?" Satan shouted angrily, "You're not allowed to mention my daughter. You don't have that right." Chi Yu shrugged helplessly and said, "But Lung Er is already my daughter. If you're willing, why don't you go back to hell and be my father-in-law? Wouldn't it be better to enjoy the happiness of a family?" Satan was filled with anger when he saw Chi Yu. What Chi Yu had done in the infernal realm could be said to be the greatest humiliation to the entire infernal realm. Ever since the appearance of the infernal realm, no one had been able to successfully escape from the ravages of the infernal realm. Chi Yu's appearance had already made Satan fully vigilant. He knew very well how powerful Chi Yu was, and he seemed to have become even more powerful than when he had been in hell the last time. In particular, the energy undulations on his body had become extremely frightening. Even Satan couldn't completely determine the characteristics of his current energy. What worried Satan even more was Chi-Yu's craftiness. Previously, he had made use of various situations to deal a heavy blow to the Burning Legion. What was he going to do this time? Also, where had that monster that even Satan felt that he couldn't resist gone to? If he was here, he probably wouldn't be able to resist the two of them if they joined forces. I've been preparing for the descent of hell for countless years. How can I change it just because of a sentence from you? Since you've chosen to be my enemy, then your only outcome is destruction. Satan's voice was still overbearing, but there was a hint of fear in it. Looking at Satan's flickering gaze, Chi-Yu said in a deep voice, "Your Majesty still didn't listen to my advice and came to Earth. This isn't a world that belongs to you. At the same time, it isn't a world that belongs to the Netherworld either. Since you've chosen destruction, then don't blame me for being impolite. At most, I'll spare your life on account of Ling Air." "What did you say?" Red light shot out of Satan's eyes, and the dark energy in his body instantly burst forth. Although he didn't have the assistance of the purple sun on Earth, the dark energy in his body wasn't too affected. Although he didn't have the assistance of the purple sun on Earth, the dark energy in his body wasn't too affected. Chi-Yu smiled and said, "Why? Does your Majesty not understand what I'm saying?" His expression suddenly became ice-cold, and he said word by word, "I said, I'm going to completely destroy all of you." The faint green light became more and more overbearing. Chi-Yu's entire body was like a sharp blade filled with surging energy. It was like a sharp blade filled with a surging energy aura. That sharp feeling forced Satan to use all his energy to resist it. At this moment, Chi-Yu's hands were stretched out by his sides, and there was an additional blue ball of light in each of his hands. Bolts of lightning revolved around his hands and flickered unceasingly. The huge energy aura didn't feel the slightest bit shaky. A layer of silver light constantly circulated around his body. That huge pressure made Satan feel even more shocked. You want to stop me by yourself? Don't forget, there's still the Burning Legion in Hell City. Even if you can stop me from beheading them, you can't stop the 3 million Burning Legion from wreaking havoc. Kid, this isn't a duel, but a war between Hell and you humans. Just you wait, I'll let you see how Hell devours the earth." The dark red light behind his back suddenly retracted, and the Demon King's domain was released in an instant. Countless Satan's figures suddenly appeared in front of Chi-Yu. Just as he relaxed a little, Satan's original body had completely disappeared. The green light formed a strangulation formation in front of Chi-Yu, and in an instant, those figures were completely crushed. Floating in the air, Chi-Yu couldn't help but reveal a cold smile. It seems that Satan is much more rational than before. He actually didn't fight me head-on. However, do you think that your Burning Legion is useful just because they have a large number? No, you're wrong. You have the Burning Legion. Similarly, I have my Zodiac Legion. Satan naturally couldn't hear what Chi-Yu was saying, and Hell City had fallen into complete silence, as if it was quietly waiting for something. In the blink of an eye, he floated down. In the blink of an eye, Chi-Yu had already landed in front of the house that he had disappeared from, and the energy aura on his body had been completely retracted. "Your Highness the Pope, we meet again," Chi-Yu said calmly as he looked at Marty, who didn't have a good expression on his face. Marty looked at Chi-Yu excitedly. "Mr. Chi, have you achieved your goal in the heavenly realm?" Chi-Yu sighed softly, shook his head, and said, "No, I haven't. I've been delayed in the heavenly realm. How's the situation here?" At this moment, the generals who had just escaped from death had just recovered from the shock. Looking at the black-armored Chi-Yu in front of them, they had a question in their hearts. Was this person really human? He actually used his own strength to chase away that demon just now. No, he definitely wasn't human. He should be a god. Every general looked at Chi Yu with incomparable respect. The name Mr. Chi was deeply imprinted in their minds. For many years to come, whenever the name Mr. Chi was mentioned in the Western military, it would immediately cause a violent reaction. The name Mr. Chi had become synonymous with God in the West. The Pope briefly explained the current situation to Chi Yu. If you hadn't arrived in time, I'm afraid we would have been finished. Mr. Chi, you've seen it for yourself. The Hell Army has completely gathered here. I'm afraid they'll launch an all-out attack soon. You're the most powerful. How do you think we should deal with the Hell Army? Chi Yu glanced at the generals and said, I don't care how you deal with the Hell Army. Although I'm here to help, as the saying goes, a guest shouldn't oppress the host. Moreover, I don't know much about war. As for the specific arrangements, it's up to you. I can only guarantee that when the Hell Army moves out, I'll immediately appear on the opposite side. I think it won't be easy for Satan to rush out of here. Your Highness, your body's condition is terrible. I think you should first think of a way to recover your abilities. Marty couldn't die yet, at least not now. The Vatican was not weak. With them here, it would be much easier to deal with the Burning Legion. So, although he wasn't a friend in Chi Yu's heart, Chi Yu still reminded him. Marty let out a bitter laugh and said, I know that I've used up a lot of energy, but before you came, I didn't even have time to sit down and rest. It's all good now. You don't have to be humble. You're the only one who can fight against Satan. We'll follow your instructions in all things. Against an enemy like the Hell Army, any tactics are useless. What do you say, generals? Marty spoke in English, and with the energy of the origin of nature, Chi Yu could naturally understand him. As soon as Marty's voice fell, the generals of the various countries agreed in unison. Not a single one of them objected. Satan's beheading operation just now had really scared them. For a moment, they didn't know how to deal with such a powerful enemy. Now, against the attack of the Hell Army, their army was just a human wall. They had to use their blood and lives to stop the Burning Legion's advance. At this moment, Chi Yu's appearance was equivalent to having a pillar of support for them. They were naturally willing to listen to Chi Yu's orders. Looking at the generals who no longer had any fighting spirit, Chi Yu couldn't help but frown and said, If that's the case, then let's do it this way. The battle between us and the Hell Army isn't something that ordinary people can handle. The armies of various countries will only suffer greater losses here. In my opinion, why don't you all retreat 100 miles and set up camp there? The clergy of the Vatican will stay and cooperate with me to stop the Burning Legion. Hearing Chi Yu's words, the generals immediately felt as if they had been granted amnesty. Retreating 100 miles was definitely a wonderful thing for them. Who would want to fight the non-human Burning Legion again? In their eyes, Chi Yu wasn't just a god. He was also the incarnation of an angel. If Chi Yu knew that these generals equated him with Birdman, who knew what he would think? The generals hurriedly agreed and immediately went to give orders to their troop. Only Chi Yu and the Supreme Pontiff were left in the meeting hall. Marty looked at Chi Yu worriedly and said, Mr. Chi, can we really stop the Burning Legion with just us? Chi Yu smiled indifferently and said, Never underestimate your own power. In my opinion, the Vatican probably hasn't released a large portion of its power yet. It's just that the appearance of the Hell Army was too sudden, so they lost the initiative in the panic. Your Highness, you've led the Vatican for so many years. Now, you don't need me to teach you what to do. This is what I'm thinking. First, we'll hold Satan's Burning Legion back here. We'll do our best to deal a certain degree of damage to them and let Satan feel that he and his men can't stop us. Then, we'll lure the underworld King Hades here. When they're all gathered here, we'll kill them all in one fell swoop. At this point, Chi Yu fiercely waved his right hand. Marty really thought that there was something wrong with his ears. He looked at Chi Yu with his mouth agape. Mr. Chi, did I hear wrongly? You're saying that we're going to lure the people from the underworld here? And kill them all in one fell swoop? Yes, is there a problem? Chi-Yu glanced at Marty. Marty suddenly realized how bright Chi-Yu's eyes were. He immediately swallowed his doubtful voice and said embarrassedly, "No, of course there's no problem. Don't worry, I'll gather all the Vatican's power in the world as soon as possible. I'll gather all the clergy and wait for your orders. But, Mr. Chi, can I ask you for a favor?" "What is it?" Chi-Yu asked calmly. Marty walked to Chi-Yu's side and whispered a few words in his ear. After listening to his words, Chi-Yu's face revealed a trace of surprise. "So that's how it is. I thought you guys really weren't prepared. I understand now. No wonder the Emperor Heaven said that to me when I left the heavenly realm. Alright, I can help you." Marty was overjoyed. "Thank you, Mr. Chi. From now on, no matter what you need, as long as the Vatican can do it, we'll do it as soon as possible. Your orders will be the same as mine. All the clergy." "Enough." Chi-Yu stopped Marty from continuing. "Do you think the power of the Vatican is of any use to me? Go, call your cardinals here. We'll start immediately." Although Marty had met with a rebuff, he still left happily. Chi-Yu coldly snorted as he watched Marty's back. "Marty, although everything you've done has greatly improved compared to before, it's still not enough. But you're the same as Yummel. Things between us will have to be resolved eventually. Pray that you can sacrifice your life for the Vatican. If that's the case, maybe I'll let the Vatican go." Although the Emperor's Heart Snow Lotus Queen and Wen Ting died to save Chi-Yu, Klinsmann really died at the hands of the Pope's 4 cardinals. Chi-Yu had never forgotten this. However, when Chi-Yu said that, he did not notice a small white ball of light flickering in a corner of the ruins on the ground. Marty, who had just left, suddenly stiffened. He looked back in the direction he had left in, and a strange expression appeared on his face. He let out a long sigh and shook his head before continuing in the direction he had originally wanted to go. In the United States, at the border of Kansas, thousands of American citizens, who originally belonged to Kansas, were slowly walking forward like walking corpses. It was as if an invisible force was driving them to walk out of the state. Everyone's eyes were completely empty, and a dusky aura filled their surroundings. It was an aura filled with deathly stillness, as if the vitality in their bodies had been completely extinguished. Not a single person in the huge crowd spoke. They just silently moved forward. A few gray figures floated in the air. Their faces could not be seen due to the thick gray fog. "Rust, these humans from Earth are really weak. They are so weak that I can't be bothered to harvest their souls." A voice came from the gray fog. "Novit, don't complain. Although each of these humans is very weak, if there are enough of them, it will still be beneficial to our cultivation. Otherwise, we wouldn't need to waste time digesting the soul aura of the millions of humans we absorbed. Didn't His Highness the King of Hell already turn them into zombie warriors? It will get easier for us in the future. We'll just let the humans kill each other under the control of our nether energy. The place where the American army is stationed should be not far ahead. We'd better be careful." Chapter 324. Rust said, "That's true. I heard that the Burning Hell Legion is still in a stalemate. His Highness Hell King and Satan have come to an agreement. Whoever occupies the territory will get it. While they haven't achieved anything yet, we have to expand our territory as much as possible. The strongest country on Earth will be our foundation in the future. Satan? That old fellow has lived for God knows how long. I originally thought that he would fight with His Highness Hell King. I didn't expect him to choose to cooperate. This proves that Satan is very smart. Cooperation is definitely beneficial to him. After all, whether it's hell or us, we don't belong to this world to begin with. It won't be too late for us to fight after we conquer this world. Otherwise, only humans will benefit." As he said that, Novit suddenly exclaimed, "I seem to sense a very uncomfortable aura, but it also seems very familiar. What's going on?" Rust and Novit looked in the same direction at the same time. They saw a faint golden light filling the distance. From their position, they could only see some faint golden light. Let's go. Let's go and take a look. The two masses of gray fog moved at the same time. Like arrows, they shot toward the location where the golden light had appeared. As they got closer, they could clearly feel that the golden energy waves were very strong. The uncomfortable feeling also became more and more intense. Rust's expression changed. This is bad. This energy is very strong, and it seems to have a certain restraining effect on us. Moreover, it seems to have a certain restraining effect on us. Quickly report to His Highness. Novit nodded and raised his hand to send out a gray current in the direction they had come from. From afar, they could clearly see the energy aura of the golden light. It was a circular light cover with a diameter of about 50 meters. The faint golden light was transparent. They could vaguely see that there were more than 10 people standing in the light cover. Everyone's position was very coordinated. They counted carefully. There were a total of 12 people, and in the middle stood a woman. The golden light was constantly being released with the woman at the center. After being amplified by the 12 people around her, it became more and more intense. As the faint light flickered, Rust and Novit's expressions turned ugly. They could vaguely feel who the energy belonged to. At this time, the humans of Kansas had already been driven by them, and the vanguard troops were approaching the golden light. The tyrannical energy fluctuations became more and more intense. Suddenly, the golden light barrier released a fan-shaped light. It shrouded the humans. The golden light was filled with a holy aura, and it was very obvious in this pitch-black world. Almost in the blink of an eye, the humans at the very front stopped in their tracks. Every single one of them had a pained expression on their faces. It seemed to be struggling from something. Rust blurted out, "Not good, our nether chi control has been blocked. Let's go and see what it is." With that, the two of them moved at the same time. They accelerated once again and pounced toward the golden light barrier. The pain on the faces of the humans who were enveloped by the golden light gradually disappeared. It was a sense of relief after being released. Their empty eyes gradually regained some vigor, and the gray airflow on their bodies was rapidly dissolving. However, their eyes were now completely confused. He had no idea what was going on. In the blink of an eye, the two clouds of gray fog had already stopped 100 meters away from the light barrier. They were getting closer, and the uncomfortable feeling became even more intense. Rust's feminine yet sharp voice rang out. Who are you? How dare you block the advance of the underworld army?" "They are humans, not the army of the underworld." The gentle and pleasant voice gave people the feeling of a spring breeze. However, this was not the case in the ears of Rust and Novit. Their bodies trembled violently at the same time, and the gray fog almost dissipated. In an instant they retreated 100 meters. A huge pressure instantly shrouded their bodies from the front. This is the power of God," Novit said in shock. He exchanged glances with Rust. Through the gray fog, they could see the shock in each other's eyes. The power of God had actually appeared on Earth. It was definitely not a power that they could fight against. The figure in the center of the golden light barrier slowly rose up. What Rust and Novit saw was a woman shrouded in golden armor. Her soft and slender purple hair flowed behind her. The golden scepter in her hand represented her identity. "Ah, it's Athena. The goddess of war and wisdom, Athena. The same master as His Highness Hades. Our feud." Novit finally recognized who the newcomer was. Rust muttered, "No, this is impossible." His Highness said that because of the 9-star alignment, it is impossible for the divine realm to send anything to Earth. Even without the 9-star alignment, it is impossible for the divine realm to pass through the huge barrier and come to the human world. She is definitely not Athena. She definitely can't be. Yuma looked calmly at the two clouds of gray fog in front of her and said coldly, "You are wrong. The divine realm is omnipotent. His Highness God Emperor already knew that you were coming to Earth to cause trouble, so he sent me here. Where was Hades, the king of hell? Ask him to come out and see me. Immense divine power locked Rust and Novet in place, rendering them unable to move at all. Both of them gradually understood that this was not a dream. They were very familiar with the divine power of Athena, the goddess of war and wisdom. Back in the divine realm, they had been very familiar with it. The battle between Hades and Athena had not stopped for a long time. Both of them had participated in such battles before, and now that Athena had reappeared, their previous confidence was completely shattered. Without Hades, the outcome of facing the goddess of war and wisdom with just 2 underworld generals was undeniable. So what if it is Athena? Not even you can stop me. The underworld has descended upon the human world, Novet said coldly. The gray fog around him and Rust quickly spread outwards, revealing their true forms. In terms of appearance, they were the same as the constellation protectors, with the appearance of humans, just that their bodies were covered with a layer of gray armor, and the armor was in the shape of gray crystals. Rust's body was very slender, and he looked like a woman. Novet's body was very tall. They constantly released underworld aura that was filled with deathly stillness to resist the divine power on Yamu's body. Mephisto's voice sounded. Miss, destroy these 2 underworld generals first. With each death, Hades' power will be weakened. They only have 81 underworld generals. Yamu naturally understood what Mephisto meant. They were very familiar with the situation in the underworld. This was naturally the best way. After all, in terms of numbers, she only had 12 guardians. Hades, on the other hand, had 81 underworld generals. In terms of power, back in the divine realm, Hades and Athena were on par. In fact, he was even stronger than Athena. However, after coming to the human world, Yamu had obtained Athena's inheritance. Compared to Athena, there was still a gap. Therefore, she was very clear that if she wanted to deal with Hades, it was absolutely not enough to rely on her own strength. Golden light shone from the scepter in her hand. A huge pressure instantly spread into a golden ring. With a wave of Yamu's right hand, it pressed towards Novet and Rust. As underworld generals, although Rust and Novet were slightly weaker than the Constellation Guardians, the difference was not too great. Otherwise, they would not have enough power to assist Hades in building the underworld. Seeing that Yamu was about to attack them, their rich combat experience was immediately displayed. 2 rays of gray light shone at the same time. The underworld aura that they had released earlier instantly retracted and concentrated on their bodies. With a furious roar, they launched an attack towards Yamu. Countless gray air currents flew towards Yamu with mournful cries. Yamu's divine power and Hades' underworld king's underworld aura were of completely opposite attributes. In other words, their energies were mutually exclusive. In the process of battle, it depended on whose energy was stronger and whose battle techniques were better to obtain victory. Although the 2 underworld generals in front of them were not weak, they were still a far cry from Yamu. Yamu moved. She had already sensed Hades' aura. If he came, she would no longer have the chance to kill the underworld general. Hence, she launched an attack immediately. The golden light transformed into countless thin lines in the air. The nether energy that was charging towards her dissipated in front of her. They were completely unable to attack her. As for Yamu herself, she transformed into a ray of golden flowing light and appeared in front of Rust and Novet in the blink of an eye. The golden light shone and the gray fog turned completely golden in an instant. Rust and Novet struggled in intense pain. However, no matter how hard they tried, their underworld aura could not break through Yamu's energy. 2 blood-curdling screams rang out. Rust and Novet, who were wrapped in the golden light, disappeared along with the gray airflow. It was as though they had never existed in this world. The deathly underworld aura was purified by Yamu's divine power along with their life imprints. "How dare you!" A voice was heard from afar, accompanied by an ear-piercing shriek. The gray airflow seemed to have engulfed half the sky in an instant. Even in this completely dark environment, the gray airflow was still very obvious. In the time it took to take a few breaths, dozens of gray airflows had already flown over. Yamu bellowed. The scepter in her hand transformed into a layer of golden light that completely blocked the gray airflow that was shrouding her. Her petite figure floated in the air and returned to the golden light shield in the blink of an eye. At this moment, her expression became unusually solemn. The scepter in her hand instantly transformed into Athena's spear and drew golden lines in midair. Wherever the golden lines passed, complicated symbols appeared in the original circular formation. The ground under the feet of every constellation guardian became the symbol that represented the constellation they belonged to. Hades was very angry. Ever since he had established the underworld, the 81 underworld generals had always been by his side. He had always believed that as long as he was around, his 81 most loyal subordinates would not die. However, just now, he had clearly sensed that the life imprints of 2 underworld generals had been erased by a powerful force at the same time. Novet had already sent the news to him. He knew that after he had come to Earth, he had ultimately met with resistance. In the distance, Hades led the 30 underworld generals and stopped 1,000 meters away from Yamu's light shield. Hades's vision was naturally much sharper than his subordinates' underworld generals. With just one look, his expression changed. He squeezed out each word through gritted teeth. Athena, it's you again. Even though I have left the divine realm and come to Earth, you still chased after me. Floating in midair, Yamu and Hades looked at each other. One gold and one gray, their gazes collided in midair. Both of their bodies swayed. On the surface they seemed to be equally matched. However, Yamu was already at a slight disadvantage. After all, she still had the help of the 12 constellation guardians barrier. Under such circumstances, she was still losing to Hades in terms of mental pressure. This was something that Yamu had not expected. According to the information that the divine realm had given her, Hades should not be this powerful. Needless to say, this lord of the underworld must have become even more powerful after leaving the divine realm. Hello, Hades. Yamu's gentle voice traveled from afar. Athena, I did not expect that we would meet on Earth. Hades's expression had already calmed down. The death of the 2 underworld generals was a blow to him. However, it was far from serious. He had originally created these underworld generals. As long as he had enough time and souls, he could similarly create more underworld generals to be his subordinate. On Earth, there was nothing else but souls. Furthermore, there were many people with filthy souls in the United States. With a flash, Hades had already walked out of the crowd. He looked at Yamu and said disdainfully, I thought that Athena had really come to Earth. Turns out that she could not come and instead passed on her divine power to the human world. Only the divine realm could think of such a method. However, do you think that you, a human who has inherited Athena's divine power, can stop me from advancing? Yamu said calmly, whether I can or not is not within my consideration. What I want to do is to stop you. No matter how far I can go, I will always stand in front of you before I give up my life. A powerful battle intent emanated from Yamu's body. With the help of her 12 constellation guardians, her aura instantly surged, causing Hades's expression to change. Good, good, good. I never thought that a human who has just obtained a bit of divine power would dare to speak to me like this. Come, let me show you what the true power of a god is. As he spoke, Hades's eyes had already turned completely gray. Over 10 gray ribbons of light lit up behind him, and a black longsword silently appeared in his hand. The scabbard of the longsword was engraved with 7 gray gems that shone with a special radiance. Yamu raised the Athena spear in her hand. This day had finally arrived. Although she knew that it would come sooner or later, she still couldn't help but feel a little nervous when she was facing a powerhouse like Hades. This time, after she returned to Earth from the divine realm, the God Emperor had decided that she would be in complete control of her own power. She would no longer have a portion of the goddess Athena's spiritual imprint in her body, which would allow her to jointly control this body. She didn't know why, but before she left the divine realm, Yamu suddenly felt indignant. This was because she suddenly thought that if the divine realm had made the same decision when she had obtained the power of Athena's inheritance, why would she have made a fuss with Chiyu? Why would she have harmed Chiyu? It was because of Athena's spiritual imprint that affected her heart. The conflict in her heart. Her soul had almost been torn apart. However, it was also because of this that her soul had been greatly tempered, and she had become the one who had the best integration with the gods in the history of Greece. Otherwise, the divine realm wouldn't have handed everything over to her. Just as Hades had said, she was just a human who had inherited divine power. However, as a human who had inherited divine power, she was no longer inferior to the goddess Athena in terms of true strength. The hair of the goddess of victory slowly rose in front of her chest, and the sharp tip of the spear pointed at her enemy. Yamu's gaze had already become completely sharp. At this moment, there was only fighting spirit in her heart. She was filled with fighting spirit. She had already seen the situation in the United States. The appearance of the netherworld was even more dangerous than the appearance of hell. Their netherworld aura was the most terrifying plague. If they were allowed to occupy Earth, then the original creatures on Earth would completely become walking corpses because of them. The longer they delayed, the more netherworld aura would spread, and the greater the harm it would bring to Earth. Therefore, after obtaining the exact location of the netherworld's appearance, she rushed over as fast as she could and stopped the netherworld's advance at the edge of Kansas. At this moment, the American army was stationed 100 miles behind. However, for the sake of the civilians of Kansas, the American army absolutely could not act rashly. In the face of a combination like the netherworld, only a true powerhouse could solve the problem. Yamu knew that she could only rely on herself now. She didn't even dare to hope that Chiyu would come to help. She knew very well. She knew what position she held in Chiyu's heart. When Yamu stabbed out with her spear for the first time, there was already a hint of despair on her pretty face. The determination to die made her raise her strength to an unprecedented height. A perfectly straight golden light. That's right, a perfectly straight golden light. It completely fused with her body. In the next moment, that golden figure had already arrived in front of the Nether King Hades. Ding! A soft sound rang out from afar. The grayish-white light and the golden light merged and separated. Hades was still floating in place, and Yamu had already returned to her original place. Hades' left hand was still holding onto his Hell King's sword, as if the sword had never been unsheathed. However, the gray energy on his body had completely turned into a grayish-white. The energy belt on his back was suddenly released, crazily absorbing the energy in the air, replenishing his consumption. On the surface, it seemed to be a tie again. However, this time, Hades was the one who had the upper hand. His view of Yamu was disdainful. He absolutely didn't believe that a human could become a true god after inheriting the energy of a god. Therefore, although he felt that Yamu's divine power was very pure, he didn't care too much, and he didn't even treat Yamu as a real enemy. However, just now, when the golden spear was in front of him, Hades suddenly realized that he was wrong. The tip of Athena's spear was only fully released when it was in front of him. The tyrannical divine power was filled with destructive divine power, and it even evoked his memories in the divine realm. The Hell King's sword was instantly unsheathed. The grayish-white body of the sword was instantly pierced by Athena's spear. Yamu's body was forcefully pushed back by him, but the sharp divine power also penetrated his body in an instant. Yamu's valiance was far beyond Hades' expectations. Although Yamu was also being attacked by the netherworld aura, she had been charging at full speed when she attacked just now. Under the influence of the momentum and the fighting spirit in her heart, she was able to unleash 120% of her strength. Therefore, Hades had already suffered some minor injuries from her spear attack. Although Yamu had been sent flying, she didn't suffer any major injuries. It seems like I have still underestimated you, human. However, I won't make the same mistake twice. As he spoke, Hades's right hand grasped the hilt of the Hell King's sword tightly and slowly drew the 5-foot-long sword out of its scabbard. A grayish-white light descended on the human world. At least 1,000 American citizens' souls were sucked dry in an instant, and their bodies immediately turned into dried corpses. The Hell King's sword glowed with a cold white light that was filled with a deathly stillness. As the white light shone on Hades's body, his aura became even more mysterious and powerful. The scabbard in his left hand transformed into a shield with 7 gray gems on it. The shield wasn't very big. Compared to Yamu's Athena's shield, it didn't even cover 1/10 of the area. It was just a very small shield. However, this shield seemed to contain energy that wasn't inferior to the Hell King's sword. Hades moved. His body instantly rose to an unprecedented level. This time, he didn't want to give Yamu another chance. Hades moved. His body rose to an unprecedented level in a split second. This time, he didn't want to give Rain-Eye another chance. Every time the massive energy clashed in the air, a dazzling radiance would appear. Every time the massive energy clashed in the air, a dazzling radiance would appear. At this point, even Yamu couldn't care less about protecting the humans below. She knew very well that she would die under the Hell King's sword if she relaxed even a little. When that time came, even more humans would die in front of Hades and his underlings' Dark Earth generals. Therefore, she couldn't lose. She definitely couldn't lose. The 12 constellation guardians remained in their original positions and didn't move. At this point, they had already activated their constellation defense. However, under the effect of the 9-star alignment, their constellation defense could no longer provide as much energy as it used to. Therefore, they needed to occupy this domain formation to better condense their divine power. They needed to condense their strength in this world of darkness. The 30 Netherworld generals who came with Hades were absolutely blind in their trust in Hades. They also formed a circular formation. Massive gray air currents were released from every Netherworld general's body, forming a gray vortex. The evil aura from their bodies became stronger and stronger. The battle between the goddess of war and wisdom and the Netherworld king was a battle between core gods. No one else could interfere, at least not the constellation guardians and Netherworld generals present. They could only watch as the grayish-white and golden energy clashed in the air. The battle between Yamu and Hades would decide the final victor. Boom! The final collision didn't separate them. Grayish-white and golden. The 2 colors of light instantly blossomed in the air. With them as the starting point, an unknown amount of the ground collapsed. The light gradually retracted, and the 2 figures completely froze in mid-air. Yamu's Athena's spear stabbed heavily into the shield in Hades' left hand. The sharp tip of the spear seemed to have pierced through the shield. This was because drops of gray liquid were dripping from Hades' left hand. It seemed to be his fresh blood. Hades' Hell King's sword was completely blocked by Yamu's Athena's shield. However, a layer of cracks had already appeared in the center of Athena's shield. It was even being corroded by a layer of gray air current. Their gazes collided at close range. They didn't give way at all. Their divine power was also continuously increasing to the point where it could explode at any time. As if they had agreed on it, the energy of the 2 gods from Greece completely exploded at the same time. A huge energy wave appeared once again, and their bodies shot out like cannonballs. The huge energy wave lasted for a full 10 minutes before it gradually stopped. Yamu's chest heaved up and down, showing her unstable breathing. She had already put away her Athena shield, and her face looked a little pale. Although Hades wasn't gasping for breath like Yumao, his gaze was fixed on his left hand. Looking at his pierced left hand that was dripping with gray blood, his face revealed a trace of a strange expression. How many years has it been? How many years has it been since I've been hurt like this? Last time it was also you. In the divine realm, it was also you who brought me this kind of pain. This time, it is still you. It seems that, as a human, you have reached the peak of humanity. Not bad, you are already qualified to be my opponent. Yamu lightly swung the Athena spear in her hand and shook her head. You are wrong. Not only have I become your opponent, but I will also be the one to defeat you. Moreover, you are also wrong about one thing. I have not reached the peak of humanity. Among the humans, there is someone stronger than me. Hades was stunned for a moment. Are you talking about that Pope? No, I don't believe it. Although I have left the divine realm, I still don't believe that a representative of the heavenly realm can be compared to the gods of the divine realm. That is impossible. Do you want to tarnish the gods you have inherited? No, I will definitely not belittle myself. I am not talking about the Pope. At this point, Yamu's eyes revealed a trace of sadness. The person I am talking about is from the east of the earth. He is the true expert. If I am not wrong, at this moment, Satan's real opponent is him. Hades, you and Satan will not succeed if you want to invade the human world. As long as that person is here, you will definitely not succeed. Maybe, he will not help me. But, even if you destroy me, your final outcome will not change. Hades's expression changed. Of course, he knew that a powerful existence like Yamu would definitely not lie. She actually said that there was a human stronger than her. Then, was that human someone he could deal with? Retreat. A cold word came out of Hades's mouth. The gray figure gradually disappeared into the distance. Yamu did not give chase. She only quietly floated in place. When Hades' aura completely disappeared, her delicate body suddenly stiffened. Then, she opened her mouth and spat out a mouthful of golden red blood. Her delicate body floated down and returned to the center of the 12 constellation guardians. Miss, how are you? Yamu's condition shocked everyone. Yamu sighed and said, I am fine. Hades's condition is not better than mine. However, it was only because he underestimated me at the beginning that he was injured by me first. In terms of strength, I am still inferior to him. Looks like our battles will become more and more difficult. Now, I can only hope that the battle in hell will end soon. At that time, the underworld will not be a threat. Satan once again stood on the walls of Hell City. This time, the Hell-burning Legion would no longer be probing their attacks. Ever since the clash with Chi-Yu, the entire burning Hell Legion did not move for an entire day. And at this moment, the burning Hell Legion's green flames had already lit up the surroundings of Hell City.